Hey, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Aiden Mattis. I am joined here by the immaculate Wendigoon for what is, I think this is episode 7 of the Weird Bible Podcast. Right. Yeah, and it's going to be our second episode on... Oh, I should probably check and make sure you're coming out of the right place. Otherwise, they may not be able to hear you. Let's see. All right, can you talk for me?
Hello.
There you are. Okay,
Cool.
cool.
Hi.
I had a feeling it might not work at first. I think I need to turn you down a tad bit.
Because it's only been 7 times.
Yeah. In the last one, I was watching it back, and you were way louder than me, and I was like, "Ooh, I wish somebody had pointed that out to me." My mods were not on the ball that night, but it's fine. I love them anyway. I'm gonna meet a few of them. They're coming up to go to Penhurst with me.
Oh wow! Very cool. Oh yeah, you're doing the Penhurst thing. That's fantastic. That's very cool.
I'm hoping that a year from now we've got enough like money and whatever that we can actually like sponsor a trip and help people pay for travel, or at least pay for people's tickets and do like a big trip. Because Penhurst Asylum has an option where if you get 10 people and it's I think $120 each, you can just spend the night walking around with flashlights and cameras in this abandoned asylum.
Oh wow!
Right? Isn't that
That's
fun?
fantastic. Why didn't I think of that?
It seems like a great time.
That's where the Penhurst is in.
It's Pennsylvania, Spring City, Pennsylvania.
Right. Yeah.
It's like 5 minutes down the road.
From you.
No, it's super
gotcha.
close. Yeah. So, and I believe you for those viewers who somehow don't know you, I believe you just finished a pretty big project in terms of fundraising.
Yes. So I was like, which project? Yeah, the fundraising. So, for those that don't know, we are working on a stalker film. And hold on one second. Talk for just a minute.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So Isaiah here is self-funding his own film with, I believe, the blessing of the people who made the video games.
The apologies. I had to. Someone was looking for the remote. I had to be the Superman for a second. Yes. So the Stalker video game series. I am making a movie on it with the writer and directors of the SCP Dollhouse and SCP Overlord films.
Fantastic. And, fantastic short films.
Great movies. Absolutely love them. So now I have moved on. We've got the funding done. Our goal was $255,000, and we raised $327,000, I believe, which is incredible. For those of you that supported it, thank you so much. It's really fantastic, and we couldn't have done it without you. But anyway, that's done and funded. So we just finished casting. We've got like our assistant director, our script supervisor, like all those positions hired, and now we're just putting in the work to film in December. So I'm very excited.
Super happy for you. I'm so excited to see what you guys come up with.
It's going to be so cool.
Yeah,
it's going to be so cool.
I cannot wait.
Some of the action set pieces we like put together. It's like, yeah. I'm ready.
And script writing is such a fun experience, right? It's totally not stressful.
Yeah, no, not at all. It was a bit more okay with me because I had Evan. The two of us did it together. So Evan's like, he's done this before, has like the ladder kind of how sequences need to go. And the big most of the big parts he was able to guide me through, so it was more of a positive experience. But I remember thinking during it, like, man, if I was by myself, this would be a struggle.
Yeah, it's tough. Aiden and I write together as well, and it helps to have somebody to bounce ideas off of. It's way smoother that way. And to answer a quick question that was in here, so usually we don't count Weird Bible towards the donation goals for Lore Lodge each month, but to answer the question, it's 400 about to the Halloween themed sexy calendar. That's that.
Doing a Halloween themed sexy calendar.
If they can raise $1,000 in the month of September, we decided we were doing a Halloween themed sexy calendar. Yes.
How shy are they?
I don't want to answer that question for you.
How shy? Someone in chat, tell me, how far is it, Aiden, to do a sexy calendar shoot? Tell me right now.
They've got to get to $1,000, and it's currently at 607. Don't you fucking dare! Don't you dare do it. I will hurt you. I will hurt you. Make them do it at least. But before he can ruin my life, today we're continuing our. This is gonna mean I have to actually go to the gym. Thanks. We're continuing our study of the book of Exodus and some of the weirdness that goes on in there. A lot of that weirdness comes, of course, from the actual location names that are given and the stretch of time. And then we get to, of course, all of the stuff that happens, all of the direct interactions between God himself and Moses and Aaron, and how we get to a point where I hate you so much.
Everyone point and laugh.
All right, Thorn Bussy, if you're watching, you're doing this with me, so good Lord.
There you go.
Thank you, Isaiah. You're just so kind.
I try.
Just
it's
so
out
you know,
of the the kindness of my heart.
You're getting a signed copy of this calendar.
Absolutely. Why do you think I donated?
On your wall. I expect to see it on your wall.
You better believe it. Absolutely.
The stream hasn't even updated it yet. Like, it hasn't even registered with Streamlabs that happened. They're probably like, wait, what? Okay, so...
You're welcome. Can't wait to see you in all those provocative poses.
Yeah, we're gonna go to Spirit Halloween and just raid the entire store. It's gonna be great. But
yes,
to begin where we left off with our last episode of this show, it was as the Jews are getting ready and as they are preparing to leave Egypt, the 10 plagues occur. The last one is the plague of death, in which Pharaoh's son is actually killed. And he's like, all right, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Y'all get out of here. Y'all go somewhere else. We don't want to handle this. And at that point, we get to probably the most famous story in the Bible. I would argue this is one of the top 5 that people know the best. And it is, of course, the story of the Exodus out of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea. And, of course, in Sunday school, you typically learn, like, okay, you know, Joseph, Moses, plagues, Red Sea, Sinai. There's a lot that happens in between. There are battles that happen. There are interactions between God and Moses. And of course, there's the whole story with the Red Sea parting. And a lot of people have asked, how is that feasible? Is that even a possibility? You look at the current map, and it's extraordinarily confusing to figure out where any of this actually occurred. But it's all very, very well written, and the names and the places and everything are incredibly detailed and explicit. There's no vagueness here. And if you read Exodus, it's much more vague. But of course, Exodus is not the only account of what happens here, because we also have the accounts in Numbers. And Numbers is aptly named by the Greeks. It is. There are so many lists. So many lists. But the first,
a lot of numbers that bounces back and forth between being like a more in-depth personal look at events, like it is with Moses striking the rock twice. Like that is more, because when you read about an Exodus, it's just like, water came out of the rock and then they left. And then in Numbers is where it gives you all the details. It balances between doing that and just chapters of like, and then this number of people went here. And then that number of people went to this place, and it's like, it's just that over and over. But like you said, it provides like record of everything.
It's incredible context. It's almost like Exodus, you're reading the summary, and then you get to Numbers, and it's like, and here's all the other details, which makes sense that they would give you 2 versions of it so that you can understand, all right, you know, here's all the stuff that happened, and then if you really want to go and do the extra reading. Exodus is almost like an abridged Numbers.
Pretty much
in one way. And of course, it's got all the episodes we love, and I think my favorite one that doesn't really get brought up in Exodus all that much, there's a quick mention of it, but it doesn't get aggressively mentioned, is the encounter with the sons of Anak, the Nephilim, who are supposedly in Canaan. The word you all want my man to say. What are they? What are they, Isaiah?
Giants.
There
There
it
we
is.
go. Yeah, I haven't got to do that in a video in a while. Yeah.
So we will be getting to the Sons of Anak and the Giants. I am excited about this one. But one thing I think that you'll probably have more information on, a better account of, would be this first thing that happens after the 10th plague, which is, of course, the consecration of the firstborn. This one took me a little while to figure out, but I think that there's a lot of biblical parallels involved here. Of course, the consecration of the firstborn is one of the first laws that's given to Moses. It is the firstborn of any animal, including human beings, belongs to God. So you're supposed to sacrifice it, with the exception of two beings, which are donkeys. I honestly did not get that one. Donkeys and human beings who can be substituted with a lamb. Isaiah, what's the significance of the lamb as it applies to Judeo-Christian belief?
But he was saying, whenever it comes to the consecration of the firstborn, your firstborn belongs to God, essentially. As a bit of a rewind, after the Garden of Eden, it was already decided from that moment that one day God's Son, a part of God himself, part of the Godhead, would come to earth as a sacrifice for humanity. By one voluntary action, humanity was condemned, and by another voluntary action of humanity, they were redeemed. So that was already decided in the beginning. We know that because whenever it's mentioned in the Garden of Eden, he says, until the Son of Man comes to bruise the serpent's head. So it's directly mentioned from the beginning that one day Christ would return. So during the time period between Eden and the crucifixion, there are a ton of, I don't want to say rules, but steps laid out for the people to follow that are a representation of Christ to come one day. One of those being the sacrifice of the lamb. Your sin is physically put onto an animal, a clean animal, that being a lamb, and then with its sacrifice, the sin's taken from you. It has to be a clean animal. They used different animals, but lambs were the primary one that were used, and that's because Christ would one day be the perfect or clean animal that's used as a crucifixion or used as a sacrifice for all of humanity's sins. That's why it's often referred to as the Lamb of God, or as John the Baptist said, "Behold the Lamb of God that taketh away the sins of the world." So the lamb is used as a substitute for that. So whenever it talks about the firstborn, they'll be used, or like a lamb can be put in their place as what's given to God. It's saying that the symbol, or like the symbolism we see still carried out, that in place of a son, a lamb is what's given to God. As one day, in place of humanity, the Son of Man, or the Lamb of God, would be the replacement for humanity's sins. So it's just showing giving something to God, and the significance of the lamb is that it mirrors Christ and his eventual sacrifice for us.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people have, over the years, been a little bit confused about the terminology with Lamb of God as well. It's often people will think of, for example, the term March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. There's a lot of people who look at things like that throughout, mostly because of European influence on culture, think of lambs as being defenseless and unprotected and weak and all of that. And that's not at all what's being said. What's being said in these passages where the lamb is referenced is that the lamb is valuable because it's pure. It's not that it's, something weak. It's not that we have to be shepherded or anything like that. The lamb is a symbol of purity and honesty and innocence, and that is why they matter so much. It's not this idea of Christians are sheep.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's there is some mention that when referencing God directly, Christians are to be like humbly before God and whatnot. That doesn't mean like in every action you have like a Quaker ideology.
Right.
But yes, exactly what Aiden said. It's the purity of the animal. I should also mention the way I phrased it kind of made it sound like you have to kill your firstborn son. I realized after I said that's not what it was. It's you give him to God. In other words, whatever God wants to have, whatever God wants to do with his life, he's the Lord's servant. When I was born, full disclosure, my parents gave me to God, which was just a prayer they had, like, God, whatever you want happen to our son, which is just a good practice. It's not anything, untoward or a weird ritual. What it's saying here is, in place of a son, a lamb will come. Just as in place of our sons, because of sin, the Lamb of God came to earth. So Like clarification, he's not telling you to kill the child.
Yeah. But I think that's an important thing to note, though, because if you look at throughout biblical history in the book itself, if we're not even talking about looking at the overarching story of humanity, we've got the first son of Adam dies. And then we have, there's 3 sons of Noah, and it's the middle one, I think, who's the bad one. But the first one is...
Ham.
Yeah. Is, first one's Shem, and he becomes... Is it Shem or Japheth that... I think it's Shem who becomes the patriarch of what will be Israel, right?
Right. It's Ham who's the bad one, right?
Ham's the bad one.
Yeah, okay, so Shem's the patriarch. Can't remember what Japheth does, and Ham's the bad one. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Japheth is supposed to be like it's written that he's like the servant of his older brother, but in higher standing, whereas Ham is supposed to be subservient to both of them.
Hierarchies were weird when there were just 3 people on Earth. It's an odd vibe all around.
It's like, all right, well, 2 of you can't be in charge.
Pretty much, yeah.
The Romans tried, it didn't go well. But no, and you see that it's that oldest child is the one that then serves God, and it is then with which parallels, of course, you've got Abel who dies, Cain who becomes who's banished, and then you have Seth who then also serves God. It's breaking down into these steps already, and then you get to Isaac. Abraham is told to sacrifice Isaac. Isaac is, of course, his firstborn legitimate son. And then it goes on and on down. You look at how the firstborn son...
That time he was saying to kill the child. Yes, correct.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't
that time it was kill the child, yeah.
But it just keeps on going throughout the Jewish story. And then, of course, you get down to Christ. So there's all these parallels that are insane in terms of the amount of time that passes between them. But this kind of is one of those first covenants that Moses makes with God, is that our people, the firstborn sons, will be rendered unto God. And then one of my favorite things that gets mentioned, because it in an archaeological sense, it's really cool. It says that this is to be seen as a sign on your hands or a frontlet between your eyes, because these were both things that the Egyptians would do in terms of like markings on their physical bodies, or like a frontlet, which is just something that hangs down from a headpiece and sits right here. So it's all just putting things in context, and it tells you that this was written at a time when people really understood what was going on around them. And when you're a historian, that kind of thing doesn't usually happen centuries later. It doesn't usually get added on. You don't see that kind of thing of people getting things that correctly if they weren't contemporaries, especially at a time where you had an entire civilizational collapse occur between these events and the events of Daniel. So
the probability of someone getting like the little gestures of Egyptian culture,
it's not there.
It's not there. Yeah.
That doesn't.
It's almost like it's real or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
It's almost like this was written by Moses.
Whoa. It's almost like he was there and perhaps knew Moses or even was him. Crazy.
Mm-hmm. But another parallel going back to that story in Genesis with Shem, Ham, and Japheth is when you get to their children, because one of the sons of Ham is Mizraim, or it might be I think it might be a grandson of Ham, is Mizraim, who of course has several sons himself, and one of them is Kalishim, from whom the Philistines emerge. So you can it just keeps going back over and over again, because then of course what you see is, as Moses is coming out of Egypt, the reason that they don't go along basically the King's Highway, the way of Horus, which runs along the northeastern coast of Egypt into Canaan, God says that he's concerned that if he sends the Israelites that way, they're going to encounter war, be scared, and turn back to Egypt. So instead he sends them a completely different route. So you can already see at this point in the Bible that those nation states that are going to cause trouble for Israel have already formed, they're already there, and the Egyptians and the Israelites are both well aware of them. And I think one of the most interesting parts of researching this for me was trying to figure out exactly where the Philistines came from. because we don't have a solid answer to it. We know that they appear. We have a situation where Abraham speaks to a Philistine king. Name is escaping me. But Abraham speaks to a Philistine king. There's a passage where it says, and Abraham dwelt for a while in the land of the Philistines. Abraham's there a while before this. So the Philistines have to have been there early.
Long time. Yeah.
Like around 2000 BC. But we don't know who they were. Nobody has any idea. We do have an idea, belief that they fought as part of the confederation that attacked Egypt during this period, during the rise of the Sea Peoples and all of that, because the Egyptians talk about the Peliset. So the Peliset, the Philistines, seem to be the same people. There was a belief for a long time that they actually came from northeastern Egypt and migrated east. Modern scholarship suggests that it might have been Crete, Cyprus, or Sicilia, which is not the same thing as Sicily.
Is there a possibility that ever thought about that the Philistines were the Sea People?
I'm fully of the belief that they were one of them.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's
wow. I never thought about that. That's two completely different areas in my brain that just chained together.
But if you follow the timing of everything, and this seems to be happening around 1200 BC, and we did a lot of the dating stuff in the last episode, but it all seems to be around 1200 BC. That is the time when the nine bows, as the Egyptians called them, were causing problems. You get Ramses II, Merneptah, and Ramses III, who all have stela that are talking about these sea peoples. And they use the terms like Peliset, Sheridan, I think Shekwesh, Wajesh, all these different Egyptian terms, which seem to refer to a very broad confederation of coastal and island peoples who came in and just caused trouble for the Egyptians and the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Mycenaeans, all during this 1200 BC period.
Is there any... I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. You just got me interested now. Is there any record, Philistine or otherwise, about confederations made during that time?
So the problem with tracking that is that there's very little Philistine.
We burned it all.
Literature.
We burned it all. Yeah, let's go.
Well, no, it's so what it is first of all, you got to remember that basically the only people who were writing at the time were the Canaanites had just started writing. So
they're very proud of it. Yeah.
Most of the other script is either cuneiform from the Hittites or the Akkadians or the Babylonians and the Assyrians, or it's Linear B or Linear A, which we haven't deciphered. So Linear B script, we don't hear anything about it, but that's also because it's from the Mycenaeans, who probably wouldn't have encountered the Philistines. But we definitely have Egyptian records that would suggest that the Philistines were part of this, because the people they referred to as the Peliset are from the exact same spot as the Philistines.
Interesting. See, I never thought about that. I learned stuff too. Look at that. Wow. Yeah, that makes me so happy in my brain, the idea that the Philistines were part of the Sea People. I dig that. Because what happens to the Philistines post? Just before the Romans showed up?
So the Philistines kind of go extinct after
that's what I thought.
Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar comes in.
Yes. Yeah.
The Israelites come in and reduce them to city-states. They're no longer a large nation. And then the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar come in, and at that point, the Philistines are done.
So the Babylonians the Philistines became a part of the Babylonian Empire. Mm-hmm. Then, more than likely, after Persia wrecked the Babylonians, they just...
Yeah, they just became.
They don't exist.
It was all satrapies, and then the Greeks come, and then the Romans come. So all of these nations that existed independently pre Neo-Babylonian conquest, there's just so many empires that come in and wash it away.
Yeah.
And also that territory, by the time the Babylonians get there, has been under Israelite rule for 300 years. You've got the kingdoms of Judah and Israel, who just. That's where Philistia was. It's
actually kind of satisfying a little bit to be researching history, because that happens where it's like, oh man, there's 800 countries here. What? And then you're like, Macedonia. It all.
Thank you, Alexander. You made all of it Greek.
I could just be like, the world.
And there's the saying, "It's all Greek to me." You should have seen it before it was all Greek. It was far more confusing. It being Greek actually makes it much easier to understand. Could be so much worse.
Then in videos, I can just be like, "Oh yeah, they were Roman," because I'm technically right. They owned it.
Oh yeah, it's the number of empires that come through this region is utterly obscene.
That's why Rome was so, not to totally get derailed, but that's why Rome was so impressive, because like there was just this age of rolling empires, like for a while, then they're gone, who like owned the world essentially, and then Rome was like, yeah, we're sticking around. That's what's so cool about them, because they lasted so long.
It's that's the main reason that they matter. It's because they were just there for such a long time. Another, just to really quickly with the Philistines thing, because I think it's fascinating. I would love to head over there and check out some of the archaeological sites. But one of the interesting things about
I want to go over there and born more of their books. They were heathens. Get rid of them.
Let me read them first.
I'm kidding. No, Aiden.
But one of the things that makes the Philistines such an interesting group is there's a few things here, but the Kalashet, who seem to be probably the people of Kalashim, because those two terms are almost exactly the same and have the same like etymology. The Kalashet people. And I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm looking for my my notes on it, but I've lost track of them. Where'd it go? Yeah, my notes got all mixed around in here somehow.
Know the feeling.
Yeah, it's very.
Okay, it's not like we're live or anything.
Yeah, I know, it's fine. But anyway, it's I think Kalushet is the right term here. It's in Genesis 10, if somebody wants to fact check me on it. But the Egyptians refer to these people as being from the west of Egypt, from like the eastern parts of what they called Libya, which was just North Africa east of Carthage. Carthage hadn't been established yet, but point is,
radical.
It seems that there's something that may have happened, which was that the Egyptians may have taken people from that western border and moved them over to the east, either as a deliberate buffer state or a colonization effort. The Romans did this all the time. But we can't pinpoint, based on artifacts that we have, the specific culture of the Philistines. Because they have both Egyptian, like Eastern, so Assyrian and Babylonian, Phoenician, and Greek traits. So one of the suggestions is that there were...
I'd say most of the countries in the region also have those traits.
Well, yes, but that's the thing, is the traits that are Greek-ish show up long before Alexander did. So
okay, I see what you're saying.
So one possibility, based on everything that's written down, and especially things that come in from later editions to the Hebrew Bible that come in around the 600s and on, it seems like these people may have, the Philistines may have been a composite people who included both Egyptians, like ethnic Egyptians, and also possibly Minoans who came over after the eruption of Santorini. So there may have been a second migration in, which would explain why the Philistines, by the time of Ramses and Merneptah, are seen as not being Egyptian. They're seen as this like other group. So there's, obviously this is all ancient Egyptology. It's stuff that we know very little about. And again, the Egyptians only really recorded their successes. The only reason we really know Egypt was struggling during the Bronze Age collapse is because of letters between the Hittite king and Egyptian pharaohs being like, hey, we need this and you need that. Maybe we could trade. But the Egyptians definitely needed food. So that's how we know they were struggling and undergoing famine and all of that. But yeah, so just the Philistines, fascinating group of people and people who will be very important in the story as it comes along. Kozlahet, that's what it is.
I also want to mention, there's been a couple times I've taken a jab because I thought it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
I realize viewers may think I'm being unnecessarily hostile towards Aiden. It's just for the law.
I didn't even see that.
just whenever I was like, what did I just say? Like, I bet all the cultures are like that. I was making a joke about them getting conquered a lot. Aiden's very smart. I love him.
So where to get back to the actual Bible story here,
that's what this was about.
part
Correct.
part of the reason that all of this is so fascinating is because we know that the Jews did end up where they ended up, and we're pretty sure that they were in Egypt when they were in Egypt. It's the time period getting between the two, and that route they take that is not the way of Horus. Because we get very specific place names. We're told that they start out at Ramses. Ramses would be Pi Ramses. It would be a city that the Jews helped build under Ramses II. The second stop on this trip, so we've got the name of one place. We can firmly say where it is. The second stop on the trip is Sukkoth. That does not exist in any known record. There is, however, a cognate area, Sukkot, which may be from the Egyptian Teju, Chesu, something like that. And where this is actually a dried up, it's now a dried up river valley, but a river valley that runs from the Nile over to the bitter lakes, the Great Bitter Lake. And even today, it's a little bit green, but it's not totally green. At the time, sea levels were higher. The Red Sea was probably connected to the Bitter Lake and to there's another lake involved here that I cannot remember the name of off the top of my head. I have it written down somewhere. But this region is also known as the Wadi Tumilat. And this is, again, my Egyptian is not good. But the point of the matter is, if you look at the actual trail they're taking, you can kind of track how many miles it is and how they ended up there. And what it works out to is that the Israelites, in those first 3 days that they leave, because we were told that they go from Ramses to Sukkoth, and then they camp there. We can assume that's a day. And then they go from Sukkoth to Etham, which is another day. And then from Etham to Pi Hahiroth, which is another day. And then they cross the Red Sea on day 4 here.
Okay.
If you look at the route that this would be, it's basically 60 miles in 3 days, which is a lot.
Right.
But it's doable.
Doable. Yes. Yeah. It lines up that a group of people walk 20 miles a day. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if they were getting up at dawn and going till dusk. So
it also makes sense logistically, because if I remember right, there's some verse about how after Pharaoh decided to send them in, they caught up in like a day. I think it says like within the next day they were which makes sense because they had horses and chariots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up at another point here, which is because they get to this spot on the Red Sea, and all we know about it location wise is that it is a patch of land between Baal Zephon to the north, Migdal to the west, and the Red Sea to the east. There is a spot where there is currently standing it's ruins now, but there is a Serapeum, which a Serapeum would have been a shrine to Serapis, who was a joint Greco-Egyptian god. They mixed together Osiris and Apis, and then rolled it into Greek mythology as well. But this term, Baal Zephon, literally means ball of the mountain of Zephon. But it becomes later on in Hebrew text a euphemism for north. So there's really only one thing this could mean here, and it's that the Baal Zephon was the north. So, and it says that they were camping opposite of it, and it says that the place they went, the wilderness of Etham, is north, and then they doubled back on that third day. So it seems like they probably ended up at this one patch where the Red Sea was very narrow, just basically almost a river leading into this next the Great Bitter Lake, which is to this day saltwater. Seems like they probably ended up there, and that if Baal Zephon was not simply a way of saying, oh, to the north, which again it may have been, why it would have been in 1200 BC, I don't know. It could have been a later, like that they later started using that word to mean north, and that this comes from a later version of the story, a later them writing it down again later. But that places them in probably the only spot where it would be feasibly possible to cross the Red Sea fast enough that Pharaoh's chariots couldn't catch them. So are you looking up where it is?
Yes. I'm looking up something related to it. So what is the area that you said
It would have
the
been
crossing theoretically would have been?
It would have been that they crossed south of the Great Bitter Lake, between the Great Bitter Lake and the Gulf of Suez.
Okay. Is that...
Today there's a canal there. Part of the Suez Canal.
Okay, I see what you're saying. All right, yeah, that makes sense in my brain.
And if you look at it, that first journey that they take, where they start to go, because they double back, they probably went between, what's the lake directly north of the Great Bitter Lake called? It's something that starts with a T.
Hold on.
If you have the map pulled up, I don't have it. But basically what it seems like to me is that they started going north, realized, this is not the best way to go, doubled back south, and then ended up down here. There's also possibly a canal that was built by the pharaohs around 1800 BC.
Timsa?
Yeah, that's it.
Timsa?
Lake Timsa.
Okay.
Yeah, so it seems to me like they probably went down, reached Lake Timsa, started going north of it, realized this was a bad idea, and then turned around and went back south. Mileage-wise, it makes sense. And that's the only way that you can explain that they went out into the wilderness of Itham and came back.
I'm looking at a map right now that does track.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to ask, are you familiar with the Pillar of Solomon?
Vaguely.
All right, so it is... Just let me... You put a picture on stream? Is that something we have the capability to do?
I have display capture on. It'll be a little funky, but I can do that.
Right. Just because I think it's cool and slightly within the realm of conspiracy, I wouldn't ask you to do work if I didn't think it was cool. Sure.
I assume you're not talking about Boaz and Yakin.
What?
You're not talking about Boaz and Yakin, the pillars on Solomon's temple?
No. These.
I don't... What should I search?
I just sent you it in Discord.
I can't pull up Discord because of the...
You fail. All right. Put in Solomon's Pillar, Red Sea, then go to images. Not the rock formation,
okay.
a literal pillar. This is the YouTuber lifestyle, kids.
I'm seeing a whole bunch of stuff here. Solomon left pillars to mark the site of the Red Sea crossing. Is that the...
Yes, that. Yes.
Let's see. Trying to find...
I was going to ask, do you know anything about it? Because I did a research dive into this like a couple years back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm trying to pull up a good picture of it.
It's not... I've overhyped it at this point for the chat. It's really not that cool. It's just a pillar. It's like a big beam.
I've got it
up. So
yeah, where are they?
That's what I was. So that's why I was looking up how close this is in relation to the region you're talking about. Because see, the story with these pillars is that while they were surveying the Red Sea, they just found them, and it turns out they were built during King Solomon's time period because of like inscriptions at them or whatever. Which means for some reason, Solomon, wisest guy to ever live, just decided to build a couple pillars on either side of the Red Sea. So a lot of people think, oh, perhaps Solomon knew exactly where the crossing point was.
Right.
He built the pillars as a commemoration. So I was seeing...
Also, to everybody sending super chats, we will get to them at the end of the show. I just want to make sure you guys know that we're not ignoring you.
25-foot tall pillar of granite. Man, that thing's massive.
That is tall. I mean, nothing compared to the temple itself, but tall.
Right, correct. But to just build it in the middle of desert, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I honestly, I hadn't heard about the Solomon's Pillars thing. I'm gonna have to look into that. That's something I'm gonna be interested in. But I did spend some time looking into the belief that there were chariot wheels found in the Red Sea, and I could not find anything to actually corroborate that.
I've heard that too, but that's always been a little.
It sounds a
I don't
little
know.
too good to be true, you know?
Sounds a little too. It's like that thing they found wood on top of Mount Ararat or whatever, or a
Yeah.
boat. On,
They found the imprint of a boat up there.
Yeah. What does that mean? Did they actually do that?
From what I understand, they did find something that did match like the dimensions. I haven't looked into it in a
Gopher wood
while.
or something up there.
Yeah. I mean, still for me, the big piece of evidence is still that tablet on Mount Ebal. Like that's still, that's the one that, as far as I'm aware, if they can actually date that to 1200 BC, there's no question. Like, there's no question about it. There's no way that that at least these people were at least there, and that is solid proof of it.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily prove any of the stories that are in the Bible, but it does prove that the Jews were there when they said they were.
Right. So, I mean, if you want to be skeptical, you can be skeptical about whatever. And you can also be like me and believe all of it, just like eyes closed, good to go. New Way, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. Sure. New Weeba.
Nueva?
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, it sounds like Nubia.
Yeah.
Probably
sure.
related.
Thanks for making me feel better.
I'm a historian.
My God. No, I unironically mean thanks for making me feel better. You're like, sure, anyone could butcher it that bad. Is that, if you know where that is that close at all to where you're talking?
So Nubia would be just south of Egypt.
Okay.
On the southern end of the Nile.
Or theoretically, is that from where you're talking about?
Within a few hundred miles.
Okay.
You know, I'm not sure exactly how long the Nile is, but it's not that far. You know,
right.
The northern borders of Nubia would be within reach.
I didn't mean to sidetrack us that hard. I was just like, Pillars of Solomon. I can bring up that little tidbit of knowledge. Yeah.
No, you're fine.
Can't help myself. But anyway, continue.
Let me scroll to the next page of my notes here. Yeah, so my theory here in terms of placement is that they went north and then decided, nope, don't like this. Let's turn around, went back south, and ended up in this spot where the sea would have been narrow enough that they could actually cross, because what it actually says is that God calls up a wind from the east and blows the waters aside. A lot of people have this vision of Moses like raising his staff, and there's, you know, like dozens of feet tall walls of water on both sides, and that's not what it says at all.
If you discredit the Prince of Egypt one more time, I'm quitting the podcast.
It's such a good movie. I just wish it was accurate.
No, they walked through and they looked at the whale that was in the river for some reason, and they looked at the fish.
Oh yeah, of course, you know.
They would DreamWorks would never lie to me.
Never. But you know the story that we
I will say real quick. I remember as a kid, you know how after the water's shut, how like his brother the Pharaoh gets thrown onto shore in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He's like on shore like Moses, like yelling and shouting. I remember being a child and being like, I don't think that happened. I don't think this is legit.
It's not the least believable thing I've ever seen. But no.
Yeah, well, it's just saying the Pharaoh got thrown onto the rocks. That's fine, mostly.
And in the Bible, it does say that all the Pharaoh's chariots and horses and men went in, but it does not say that he himself went in.
Pharaoh. Yeah.
Which,
I doubt
honestly,
he was there, but
it says that he got his chariot and went, but it does not say that he was in the river. But it does say that God hardens Pharaoh's heart and decides. And basically, like what's implied is, as you read through Exodus, and I want to know your thoughts on this too, is that God is putting the Jews in a position where they are bait to Pharaoh, so that he can display his power. So I'm curious.
You're talking after the crossing of the Red Sea?
I'm talking right beforehand.
Okay, all right. Yeah. I was about to be like, where does Pharaoh show up after the Red Sea? Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, yeah, that guy's a lot. By the time they cross the Red Sea, that guy is yesterday's news. They got new drama to worry about. So you're talking whenever Moses is in Egypt confronting the king, and doing all that. Okay.
I'm talking about there's a part where it says right before they cross the Red Sea that God hardens Pharaoh's heart and says, "Why did we let our servant class leave? Like, let's go get them." Yeah.
You're okay. I thought you were I'm very dumb. I'm sorry. I
You're
thought
fine.
you were saying
I should have been
like
more
an
specific about.
expansive.
I
I
should
thought
have
you
been
were
more
saying over
specific.
the entire history of Egypt. Like, I was about to be like, well, Aiden, Joseph visited a while back, and that got some people to go that way. Anyway, yeah. So specifically, that's similar. Well, it's along the same line of thought as our last episode. Whenever you were asking about, or we were talking about the concept of Pharaoh hardening or God hardening Pharaoh's heart. I am struggling. I don't
You're
know what
fine.
the problem is. I feel great. I just can't speak for some reason. Whenever it mentions that about God hardening Pharaoh's heart, we talked about how typically in the Old Testament there was these much more physical spirits, and there were like it doesn't just talk about angels appearing or working through the unseen. It's like an angel shows up to somebody,
Yeah.
physically speaks with them. It's very different than it is now. But during that time, there were several spirits or evil spirits around Pharaoh at all time. We know that him and his sorcerers had some kind of magic. It wasn't as powerful as God's, as we saw whenever Aaron threw down his staff and swallowed theirs. But the fact that he had magicians that could create snakes out of staffs, he clearly had some kind of dark evil that was working with him and on his side. A lot of the time, whenever we see stories like that where it says God hardened Pharaoh's heart, that's not God removing free will for someone and making them do something. That's God removing his hand of protection from them. Similar speaking to Pharaoh in the Old Testament is King Saul, the same King Saul who tried to kill young shepherd boy David before he became King David. Several parts in the Old Testament when speaking of Saul where it says that God, I don't think it says hardened, I think it says bittered his heart or so similar.
Depends on the translation, I think.
Depends on the translation, yeah. Very similar to the same speech it uses with Pharaoh.
Yeah. I've seen harden, I've seen strengthen, I've seen
yeah, like it says God did something to make Pharaoh / Saul behave the way they did. However, in several of those mentions with King Saul, it says that God did, XYZ, hardened his heart. From that, Saul gave himself over to perpetual spirits, dark spirits, something spirits. It says it gave him over to earthly spirits, I think is the word it uses. So there we get a direct mention that it's not saying God's like, all right, you're going to act bad now. It is God who was being the guiding force, the leading force on these people, saying, all right, you are now resigned to make your own decisions. And in those decisions, there's several other spirits or supernatural entities or demons, as I believe, or devils around the people we read about in these stories. So as soon as God says, make your own decision, they travel to one of them. They go to their side. Pharaoh was obviously already, within it. He has magicians in his court who work with dark magic, essentially. So as soon as God said, all right, your heart's hardened, or my hand, you are given to your own devices, his devices was to chase what he wanted and to lust after power, similar to Saul and similar to several other kings of the Old Testament. There's also an argument to be made. It kind of lines up with what you were saying, or what you've talked about before, that God's miracles work through the world he created for us, like through the natural. There's an argument to be made that a lot of that giving over to dark spirits had to do with like personal mental anguish, or like letting themselves go mentally, or essentially going insane to a degree. Because there's a lot of language around King Saul that kind of speaks to that he drew up violence and bitterness in himself. So some of that could be just God allowing them to make their own decisions, but I believe it was giving themselves over to other spirits as well. So essentially, whenever it says that he hardened his heart, I think that is just saying Pharaoh was allowed to chase the demons and evil source around him.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of modern Christianity kind of, I don't entirely understand why, but it seems to have watered down the intensity of what was going on at this time period. Because if you look at what most people learn in church and Sunday school and all that, on the rare occasion that somebody actually goes into this stuff, a lot of the time it'll be very much like, everything that wasn't God was a powerless idol, And that's not really what the Old Testament is saying. It's there are these evil spirits that do have real power, and the reason that God has to be so present in this Old Testament era is because he has to actually step in and overpower things. Otherwise, the people who are following him are left on their own. And that's one of the things that changes, of course, in Christian theology with Christ himself, is we have the Holy Spirit now, and therefore we have our own innate internal defense system. But the Jews are walking around in a time period where there were demons all over the place, basically being like, I'm a god too. And Yahweh is like, no, you're not. And they're like, well, these people believe I am, and they sacrifice to me. And he's like, allow me to flick you away. But I think
we talked to go ahead. Sorry to cut you off.
I think that's like something that gets left out, and I think a lot of people, the second you start addressing this, they want to cry Gnosticism or something like that, or heresy, and it's not. It's not to say that these are beings with creative power. It's not to say that these are beings with anything akin to what God is, but there is the recognition that they're there and that you need to be aware of it. And I think that that's the lesson that's supposed to be taken out of this. Not that God is the only figure with the power to interfere with humanity, but that he is the most powerful of them, and he's the one that created everything. So there's nothing that is God. There are only lesser supernatural beings.
Yes, yeah, there's one God, and then there's the manipulators that exist apart from them. A lot of people view stories like this and kind of think of it in like a modern context, but that doesn't really. Again, our modern context is after Christ, after the temple was rent, after all that stuff has changed. In the Old Testament, there are several points where, like, whenever we get the children of Israel later, like when they're being led by Joshua, they'll come to these tribe of people who are worshiping a god. So we think, oh, that's just, a false god they made up. But then the people perform magic and like will make demons and monsters appear and like summon devils or whatever. Like that, there's something happening there. I think the way you worded it is best. Like, sure, there are manipulators. There, I believe to be, demons or devils, existing in the earth at this time. But there's no creator. There's only one creator who made them in the first place to begin with. But yeah, whenever that people are like, oh, well, nothing else has power on earth. But whenever, in one of the most famous Bible stories ever, when Moses gets to Pharaoh's doorstep, there's magicians who perform magic. So out there somewhere. Some argue that perhaps magic in that sense was just kind of a thing that was neutral and then people could use it either way. But again, I haven't existed pre Christ, so I couldn't speak one way or the other. In the New Testament too, the disciples throughout the magicians had spirits with them, and they would, like, it talked about some of them levitating or like throwing out smoke and stuff like that. So there was clearly these powers existing in the earth. There's just no creator. Like
exactly, there's nobody who's on the same scale as God. And I think that's the key point here, and that is what God is telling the Jews at this point in history. Whenever they come across false idols, whenever they come across, and when he says thou shalt have no other gods before me, the word used in the Bible is Elohim. Thou shalt have no other Elohim before me, and a lot of people point to that on the other side of things, the extremely Gnostic side of things, who go and say, oh, well, this is proof that there were other gods. And it's like, you got to understand the nuance of what the word Elohim actually means. It's not, there's multiple creative figures. It's not that we're dealing with a universe that was created and God's populated. No, God created everything and also created these other beings to serve him, but gave, some of them fell. And so now, rather than just exterminating everything like that, like he could, he's chosen to create a world in which he can kind of play with them. Because that,
I think it's in. Go ahead.
No, you.
Well, I was gonna say, like, when you read stuff like the Book of Enoch, which I don't believe everything in there to be canon. I think with a lot of extra works like that, they took elements and then sort of molded a story around it. But then says that a lot of the early witchcraft and stuff that people learned on Earth, like magic and sorts, were taught to them by fallen angels.
Yeah.
Or the Watchers. And I think that lines up with a lot of what's mentioned throughout the Old Testament, where they'll just come across these tribes of people who are worshiping these different idols and statues and have magic of some degree. It's, again, I believe all of them to be demons or devils, especially because there's points in the Bible whenever it mentions demons appearing to people as animals. And then what are the majority of the false god statues we see?
They're
animals of different kinds.
They're
normally
like a
animals.
fish, a dog, a wolf, something along those lines.
You got Dagon the fish, you've got the Baal the bull, like all these different figures, and then it's like, I guess that came from nowhere, but then you read stories about like when Peter saw the demons in a vision, they appeared as the ox, the fish, like all that stuff. So anyway, you have, and also, I know I'm on a rant, but also whenever it mentions like the higher order angels in heaven, like the cherubim, they have the faces of ox, wolves, and a man and stuff like that. And again, there's the mention in Ezekiel that Satan is most likely a cherub. So anyway, across all this stuff, you have these depictions of demons being depicted as animals, and then you have these ancient people who had magic and powers of some kind who depicted their gods as animals. So draw the two together.
Yeah. There's something that I wanted to bring up because somebody mentioned the word witch. But the word they said the Bible says suffer not a witch to live, which is of course an English translation. But there's the word witch.
That verse goes kind of hard.
It does. But the word witch did not originally mean that. I'm trying to remember where I found the information on it.
That's like translation. Like again, I believe the KJV to be most accurate because it went to the source, but even then you have a lot of words that had to be dragged out of Hebrew into English, so stuff changes, melds.
Yeah, I'm trying to
it's a lot to have to put like all the context and imagery of ancient Hebrew into modern English.
Yeah, unfortunately the etymology website I'm looking at right now it lists they're like, it's actually mentioned in one of the laws of Alfred the Great, but they included it in the Old English. And well, to read this to you, Da femnen thegawinith unfun gelde kreftigen en schinlen in vikan ne let thu dav liban.
You should just do the podcast like that.
So I don't know what that means.
I thought you had a degree. What the heck? Fraud, phony.
I have a degree in medieval studies, not in Old English. But yeah, it had a different meaning. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but if I remember correctly, it was like something more along the lines of someone who deceives than someone who practices witchcraft. It's not a super important difference, but it is one of those things that like I feel necessary to mention, that words change over time, and you got to remember that the King James version of the Bible is from 1611, so any words that are in it, you've got to use their 1611 definitions. The NKJV and the ASV and the ESV all account for this and are translated into modern English via the same exact process, but that's neither here nor there. The point of the matter is, yes, it does say you shouldn't suffer a witch to live, but the terminology of what witch means is quite different, because
whenever the most famous witch in the Bible is the Witch of Endor, which is the one that Saul goes to try to talk to Samuel. Mm-hmm. And whenever he goes to this witch, for one, the king Saul had put out a decree that all the witches should be murdered. Then when he goes to this witch, she literally begins to raise dead spirits. Like they appear in horror in front of him. And Samuel tells Saul he's going to die. It's a pretty metal scene.
I'm so excited for when we get to Samuel.
Bro, no joke, the Samuel through David arc is my favorite section of the Bible. I can't think of a better word. I had to make it sound like an anime. But that's my favorite portion of the Bible. First Samuel through Second Kings.
It's a fantastic section, just for it gives you a great picture of the culture at the time too, which is something that's kind of left out of the Torah. It's so much legalism that you don't get a ton of the what were Jews culturally like at this time. That period of Judges into Kings really gives you this is Jewish culture.
Yeah.
But one thing that that is important to Jewish culture is, of course, those 10 Commandments, which we've got to get to that.
Yeah. Continue.
And so coming out of this period where they cross the Red Sea, they immediately end up back in the wilderness of Etham, and then from there they spend 3 days out there and they find no water whatsoever before they eventually make it to Mara. Which Mara is, of course, where they find the bitter waters. And do you remember what Moses does here?
He dips the leaf or the branch of what kind of tree? It's like a palm leaf, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a palm tree, I think, if I remember correctly. But yeah, he dips it. He's like, I'm going to put this tree in the water, and that's going to fix it.
Woo! It happened. Woo!
But the best part of this is coming out of a period where the Jews have been like, hey, Moses, there's nothing to eat or drink. We're in a desert. And Moses is like, I got you. Allow me to turn this salt water into fresh water. And then the Jews still don't believe him.
I won't keep derailing everything
No, go for it.
Because we need to get to the 10 Commandments. But that is the reoccurring theme. These people crossed the Red Sea. They watched the ocean open up. And the entire time, it's their lack of faith that continues throughout the story. Every time they get near the end, they begin to think, I guess God just brought us out here to die. I guess that was his whole purpose. And that, like, they cross the Red Sea, and then they doubt him. They're like, we don't have anything to drink. Moses makes salt water into fresh water. Later, they think we don't have anything to eat, and manna falls from heaven. Get this. I have to mention this because this drives me crazy. While they're out there in the desert, the Sabbath was special. They were not to work on the Sabbath. So the rule was, all days of the week to collect enough manna to eat for that day. And part of the reason for that is the evidence that God will provide. God will be there. You don't get enough food for tomorrow because the manna will be back tomorrow because God said it would. You're not to work on the Sabbath. So the day before the Sabbath, collect enough for 2 days so that on the Sabbath you have enough food to eat and you don't have to work. People continuously disobeyed because they kept trying to go get manna on the Sabbath because they didn't think that God would do what he said he did. Literally 6 days in a row of food falling from the sky, and they're like, I think he's lying about that seventh one. I don't think he means it. It won't happen again.
And he makes a point of it too, because he's like, collect as much as you need and eat it the day you're supposed to eat it, because in the morning it's going to have worms in it. And they're like, I'm just going to collect it and save it for the next day. And then they wake up and there's worms in it. And they're like, my God.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Whoa. The one who brought food from the sky was right.
Exactly.
Crazy.
It's like,
he knows what he's talking about.
Who could have possibly imagined this? There's one episode before this where I just want to mention it before we move on. That because I forgot to bring it up. After they leave Mara and go to Elim, which is the next stop along their way, and one thing that I was thinking about all of this is that these once they really get out into the desert, I think they're following Bedouin trade routes, because that would explain why these places have names.
Interesting.
And why the names would be in Semitic language. So that kind of explains why they would be there.
Also, they were going on a straight route till the rock, correct? And then they started the whole spin through the desert thing.
I know at one point they head south. I'm trying to remember exactly.
They get to the rock. Moses strikes the rock.
No, I'm pretty sure it's after the rock.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure they go like northeast, and then Moses does that, and he's like, all right, 40 years. go on a walk.
Yeah, so it's just like, I love how God's like, take a lap.
Take a lap. Time out. Go back. Do it again. No, but the reason I mention that is because it is that original path northeast. Is that like a Bedouin trade route?
There's several. There is one that basically goes straight east from where they are over to where they end up at the edge of Edom. There is a route that goes that way, but there's also a route that goes south through the mountains because there's rivers there, which is the route they end up taking. And all of these places have these names, but most of those names do not apply to anything today, except they kind of sound like certain Bedouin trade stops.
Interesting. Okay.
Because they would stop at these little oases along the way. But at one point when they're in Elim, I believe, they end up getting their they have no water, but they find these 12 wells, and by the 12 wells they find 70 palm trees. They stay there for a little while. Which, of course, what do we end up with very soon? We've got 12 heads of 12 families and 70 priests.
Ah, interesting.
Within the chapter. So there's...
Oh, very cool.
There's so much foreshadowing and symbolism that happens throughout all of this.
Do the 12 families come from the wells?
No.
Is it like,
the 12 families thing happens later.
Interesting. Okay.
But no, there's 12 wells and 70 palm trees, just like by the time they get to Sinai, there are 12 families and 70 priests.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I never put that together. Very cool.
Yeah. And on the way that they're...
Can you name all 12?
All 12 tribes? I wish. Yeah. I wish I could do that off the top of my head. I'm sure you can. You want to do it just to flex?
Oh, no. I can't do that. The only ones I know are like obviously the Levites and the...
I know
I can't think of many off the top of my head.
I know Reuben, but that's more because
Reuben?
the Jews invented a very good sandwich with that name. Those New York Jews, those New York Jews know how to make a sandwich.
I hate you. Yeah,
Levi,
I can't believe in the
Reuben,
desert he invented a sandwich. Reuben
was Cohen one of them? I'm trying to remember, but
keep talking.
But yeah, so the time between leaving Ramses and getting to the point where they're in the wilderness of Sin, oddly enough, is what it's called, is about a month. So we're looking at a month time span. That makes sense.
I remember.
Okay,
I've got... Oh, and the Benjamin. Okay, so you want me to just read off the list? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulon, Joseph, and Benjamin.
Mm-hmm. And these are all based off of, if I remember correctly, the tribal breakup is based off of Jacob's sons.
Hence why there is a Joseph and a Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
And Reuben, if I remember right, in the story is the one who goes back to check on Joseph.
Yes.
So yeah, those are the names of...
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And yes, chat, manna. Manna is the term for the food that God brings from heaven. And then God, by the time he's...
Did chat just vibe check me? Did they just correct me on my pronunciation?
No, that was me subconsciously.
You did.
doing
Okay.
it.
All right. That's fine. That's fine. Mana, got it. I thought you were saying that because chat was like, "Oh, does this idiot mean mana?"
No.
Okay. All right. We're doing that. Got it. Continue.
No. But so they have their 6 days where the food comes, and then the 7th day where no food comes because they had twice the food on the 6th day. And then God's like, all right, so now that I gave you all this food, what you're going to do is you're going to fill up some pots with it and carry it through the desert with you because there's no food in the desert. And I have to do this. You know I have to do this. Carrying a bunch of magical food through the desert sounds a hell of a lot like what the hobbits were doing in Return of the King.
You like this?
With the lemma spread. Because Tolkien pulled everything from the Bible.
Hate you.
He was a biblical scholar.
I know, but just it's the way you introduce the topic that drives me crazy. Mm-hmm. You're just like, the children of Israel did this. Sound familiar? That's right, the hobbits. So the hobbits.
That's right, everybody. You heard it here first. The hobbits are Jewish. I have decided.
Now. Oh no! How do I leave a Discord call?
But
will not be in the screen record.
But I want to. This is where we get to the point where Moses taps the rock and we get water coming out of it. Which do you want to expand on it?
Yeah. So this is one of the situations like we were talking about earlier, where in Exodus it's just kind of brushed over. The numbers gives the further definition. So while they're traveling through the desert, this is another period of time where the children of Israel are not faithful. They do not think that God's going to continue to provide for them. And after Red Sea, obviously the 10 plagues in Egypt, then the Red Sea, mana continuing to fall. Hasn't been water for a couple days. Again, they have drinks. They've been drinking. Yeah. They're not dead. Then they go to Moses and they're like, "Where's the water? What's your problem with the water? Why isn't God giving us water? Does he hate us? I bet we're going to die now." That's what it is. So Moses goes to God, and Moses begins to show signs of fear as well, which again is hilarious. Mm-hmm. So Moses starts to say, there's no water. What am I to do? And the reason that Moses is punished in the way he isn't because the people were bad. It's because Moses was bad in reaction to the people. These people begin to get scared, and Moses is like, "Yeah, you want me to be the one who stands in front of them? I didn't even want to be the speaker. You gave me this job." So God says, "Go to a rock." What's the name of the rock? It's a rock.
Bible
God says, God says, "Go to the rock, and I want you to tap it once with your staff." Moses' staff is a tool that's used a lot whenever they go to war. Moses holds up the staff, and it gives the army strength. He holds out his staff as the Red Sea parts. There's a lot of imagery used with Moses' staff. So God says, "Go to the rock, tap your staff against the rock, and water will flow out of it." While he's on his way over there, people start saying, "I bet, Moses, you don't know what you're talking about. Now you think water's going to come out of a rock?" Again, this is the group of people who've been fed from the literal sky for the past several months. They're like, "Water doesn't come out of rocks, idiot." So Moses gets mad. He's like, "You people are ungrateful, and now God wants me to be the person who stands in front of you. Well, you know what?" And he takes his staff and he slams it against the rock twice. God still delivered on his promise. Water flew out from it. But because of that, because of Moses's hatred and also the people's insolence that they continue to not believe God moving forward, God's like, "All right, you're about to be given the promised land to Abraham, your patriarch. You are about to be the most blessed people I've ever seen on the earth. Before you get your reward, you're going to learn to act like it." So he says that instead of just walking north into the promised land flowing with milk and honey, they are instead going to have to journey around the desert for 40 years. So it's because of the combination of the people not trusting God and Moses becoming furious and hating the position and gifts that God has given him that God says, "All right, do a lap. Take 40 years around. Come on, let's go."
Yeah,
that's what happens with the rock.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like it's immediate in Numbers, at least, where he's like, "Moses lifted his hand and struck the rod twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation, their animals, drank." And then immediately after, by the way, in the New King James, the header for this is Moses' error at Kadesh, which I think is hilarious. And it's then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. This was the water of Meribah, because the children of Israel contended with the Lord, and he was hallowed among them." So basically, he literally tells them, he's like, "Sorry." Should have believed me, I guess.
Well, you got to think about it. It's honestly similar to God hardening Pharaoh's heart. That whole thing, like God they went from being literal slaves to God saying, "Hey, walk this direction. When you get there, you're going to have everything you could ever want. It won't be quite Eden, but it'll be as close to Eden as you're going to get, the promised land." Mm-hmm. So maybe it could have been like Eden. We don't know what God had in store for them. But God was returning Abraham's people. He was walking them through the desert, giving them safety and raining food from the sky the whole way there. And they kept saying he's trying to kill them over and over. And the only thing that God was holding on to, he's like, Moses is still my guy. Moses will still believes in me, has my interest at heart. And then they get to the rock, and Moses like, "I don't want to do this anymore." Whack, whack.
The whack.
And from there, God's like, "All right, you're gonna get treated like everyone else. Go." walk through the desert. You don't get a promised land. I mean, you will eventually, but not for 40 years.
Yeah.
And Moses would never go to it. He would eventually see it. God gave him the ability to see it at the end of his life. But Moses will not inhabit the promised land.
Yeah. In fact, I believe it says that nobody over the age of 20 at this time.
Yes, a lot of them die after this.
Yeah.
From various conundrums and ridiculous situations they get themselves into. Yeah.
Yeah, and then all of this happens, and eventually they do make their way to Mount Sinai. There's a lot of wandering around in the desert, and there's not a ton that happens between this episode with the rock and Sinai. It like literally almost nothing, but there is a battle, and this is the first mention of Joshua that we get.
Yeah.
Which Joshua, and it's kind of funny because Joshua's just introduced as if we should know who this is, because
Joshua, he's Joshua. Yeah.
We're just midway through Exodus 17. Now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim, and Moses said to Joshua, "Choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand at the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." The rod of God is like one hell of a term. So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses is an old dude at this point, so his hands get tired. And he starts to kind of drop his... So they literally put a rock under his hand so he can just hold up the staff to make sure that Israel wins. Which is just funny. I can't really think of any theological significance. It's just funny.
A lot, like I said, a lot of the things that happen to them during this time is symbols that eventually point towards God.
Yeah.
Similar to how I said earlier, every time a miracle was performed, it was done with the rod. It was not Moses and his own power doing it. The rod was being the stand-in for God, or like you said, the rod of God. That is God's power acting. So in this moment, it is Moses standing by the battlefield, physically putting the rod up into the air. Mm-hmm. That it's showing God being above us, God putting his power forth on the army, which is why I love the visual that happens after the rock whenever Joshua and physically hold up his arms. Like Moses is the old man standing, but the two, a lot of, churches have viewed that as the brethren helping each other. Two of the brethren helping him put God first. Yeah. It's a very beautiful image that eventually leads in Christ. A lot of stories in the Old Testament, I believe, were framed and done in the way they are for us one day, for the symbols that it brings us like that. That's why I still see a lot of beauty in the stories of the Old Testament. But yeah, I like how Joshua just gets brought up. Joshua is one of my favorite characters in the Bible because that guy at multiple points will literally go to war for what he believes over and over. But he is when he rules after the rules, when he comes to leadership after he's a judge, the first judge after the death of Moses. That guy is a G. Everything that happens, he is on it.
And he seems to at this point be Moses is grooming him for rule, for leadership.
Yeah.
And that's part of why he goes down. And I think that there's multiple meanings in this passage if we look at it. First of all, you've got Moses who's doing the work of the Lord, but he's being aided by his two brothers. I think you can look at that and see the Trinity pretty easily. That all of this in order to bring victory to the people of God, all three are involved. I think there's some easy symbolism to see right there. And also he gives Joshua this moment where as far as Joshua's aware, he's the one winning the battle. He's winning because he's so kind of even without.
Sorry, not Joshua and her. Yeah, not Joshua and her lifting his arms. It's Aaron and her.
Yeah,
lifting it.
My bad. You're fine.
Yeah.
Joshua thinks that as far as he's aware, he's like, I am a really good commander. I got this.
I'm doing so good.
And then, of course, he goes on to be a very confident battle commander over time. And this is really the first time the Israelites have ever gone to war. If you look at their history, Jacob's only got himself and his 70 people. He's got his 12 sons and their 70 people. Also, of course, the 12 tribes and the 12... and the 70 prophets and the 12 wells and the 70 palms. This one's just over, and they really hammer you with it. But this is the first time the Israelites have ever gone to war as Israel, and they end up winning. Which, of course, you would think they would go, maybe God is with us, but they don't really figure that out. So
These are the people who thought food from the sky was fine, but rock water not happening.
there's absolutely no way water is going to come out of that rock.
That's not where water comes from, idiot.
And then, of course, there's write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. So he literally, God is like, after you beat them, I'm going to make the world forget they existed, which is just gangsta. Wow. Rip Coolio.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Blot them out from under heaven.
Yeah, and so Moses builds an altar and called its name "The Lord is my banner," which is absolutely a tattoo I will be getting, because that is a sick phrase right there.
Yeah.
And says, because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. So he's basically like, these specific people, screw them. Which isn't
they show
vindictive.
up a few more times around that time,
Yeah,
right?
is it vindictive? Kinda, but like, it's also kind of badass.
From what they see their behavior later, I don't exactly have sympathy for like, you know, the rapist pillagers.
Yeah, they're not good
there.
people. But the next thing that happens, I think, is very interesting, because it's kind of it helps set the stage for the institution of the judges. When Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, comes back and he's like, "I've brought your wife," and they go on. But Jethro's sitting there watching Moses kind of like have every single person in Israel come to him with their petty squabbles, and he's like, "You know, Moses, you should really appoint some lieutenants or something to help, and then you can take the more difficult cases." So some random Midianite guy named Jethro came up with the system of appellate courts in 1200 BC, and we use it to this day. There's some AP Gov for you. Whenever they ask whose idea was the Supreme Court, write Jethro. And you will fail. You will fail immediately. Do not do that.
Give him my number. I'll argue it for you. It's okay.
In world history, go for it. U.S. history, I would avoid bringing up Jethro. That might not do much for you. But it's a very interesting kind of conversation he has with Jethro. And I've got the Exodus version pulled up right now. But Jethro just kind of, he comes to him very matter-of-factly. Moses is doing his job from morning till evening. He's just hearing people's cases, their disputes, their problems. And Jethro comes to him and says, "What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit and all the people stand before you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one and another, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws." So Moses is at this point acting as kind of this first judge and the conduit between God and man. And his father-in-law says to him, "The thing that you do is not good. Both you and these people who are with you will surely wear themselves out. For this thing is too much for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. Listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. Stand before God for the people, so that you may bring the difficulties to God. And you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk out and the work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be the rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people will also go to their place in peace." So Moses is getting earthly advice from a non-Jew man, and it turns out to actually be good. And I think it's very interesting that, like, you have this moment where God, like, allows this sage counsel from somebody who's not an Israelite, from somebody who's not even part of the congregation, and he just sits there and he's like, "Yeah, let's do that." So I think there's a moment here to look at it and see that, like, a lot of people might look at that and you go, why didn't God think of that? But the way I look at that passage is not that God didn't think of it, it's that God is allowing man to innovate and to think freely and to make decisions that work for mankind. Rather than stratifying the entire thing for us, he has decided, you know what, I've created this intelligent race of people. If they come up with good ideas, they can do it. And he's also, in doing this, he's creating a position where the Jews have precedent for taking the ways of outsiders, if they work, and applying them to their own system of government, their own system of rule. So he's kind of giving them license to adapt and to be self-sufficient and not rely on him for literally everything, but to trust in him and also trust in themselves. And I think that that's an important message that comes out of this in what is really not like talked about much as a passage of the Bible, but you get this moment where God is like, trust me and trust yourselves. And this is, you know, I just think it's a really good message, if that makes sense.
Now, intelligence itself is a gift, capability for humanity to understand. And a lot of the times, I've talked about this enough at this point, throughout all of human history, God has maintained our free will. There's guidance and there's direction and there's provision, but we have always had that free will as creatures, because that was like the purpose of our creation in the first place, right? So to that degree, we see that, you know, it's God's wisdom that imparts these people, but it's their own ideas, it's their own agency that allows it to come to be, which I am very thankful for, because I am glad that, you know, while it would certainly be within God's right to direct everything I do, that I am a creature of decision. And I don't always use that to correctly or for a good purpose, but God, you know, suffers me regardless. But we see that all the way back then. That people are coming up with their own ideas and they're adapting and they're working, and God's provision's always there. It's kind of like, it's a little overused, the idea of God being a parent, but in a lot of ways it is like a watchful parent. Like, you have what you need, you're given the direction, and everything you have to succeed, it's your choice to actually work with it. So yeah, I think it's beautiful that we see that happening even then. Also, something I want to mention while we're on that about decision and free will and whatnot. I like rag on the children of Israel a lot during this part of the Bible, because I'm like, how could you have manna fall from heaven? How could you have that? But at the same time, I understand as a Christian that I have been provided for by God and often continue to doubt and mistrust him. And I am, at least they didn't have the Holy Spirit, right? Like, the Holy Spirit didn't come to in bed with us until after Christ. So at least they had some kind of excuse. What excuse do I have, right? So I'm ragging on them because it's comedic for the podcast. Not that I think I could do any better, because I also would have been like, rock water.
It's got minerals. It's like, but I think it's also indicative of where the Israelites are in their timeline and their growth period, because this is their first foray into independence. And what we see here is they're very distrustful. They're almost childlike as a culture, where they kind of just want to go back to safety. They're like, yeah, that was bad, but at least we were safe. At least we were guaranteed life. And by the time we get to Christ, Israel has gone through a period where it has been, you know, fighting for its very existence, and then supreme, and then comfortable. And then by the time we get to Christ, they're back to being like overconfident and just ignoring God as he speaks to them in the flesh. So it kind of goes through this entire like maturing period where they go from, you know, not trusting God because they're scared, to not trusting God because they think they're smart. Like,
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And proclaiming themselves to be wise, they became fools, as Christ said.
Exactly.
Getting themselves to be wise, they become fools. Yeah. It'd be like that. The bell curve of faith in Christ. Yeah. do you know the VeggieTales clip?
I've probably seen it, but it's probably been a long time.
The one where he's like, I think it was better when we were back in Egypt, and the little P's like, we were in slavery. I think about that all the time. Yeah. We were in slavery. And the old's like, it wasn't bad. We had 3 meals a day.
Legit conversation that is had over and over through history, though. Dude, that happened in the American South after the Civil War. There were movements to bring back slavery from freed slaves. Like it happens over. There is something about humanity that is just like, I would prefer
weird,
safety to freedom.
Yes, that happens a lot.
You've always got someone who's just like whacking them over the head, like, stop it.
I was reading about the War of 1812, and you know the this is 100% sidetracking it, but that's
fine.
Okay. There were several Native Americans who fought with the colonials in the War of 1812, and several who fought with the British. And the ones who fought with the British, because the British treated the Native Americans like dogs, essentially. During the French and Indian War, they grew to dislike them, which eventually, for obvious reasons, the French and the Indians fought against the British and the colonials. So after that war, the British dignitaries and the Native Americans hated each other. So then whenever the American Revolution came, the natives sided with the colonials and fought the British, right? So that was how it was for 40 years until the War of 1812, whenever Britain's like, no, we need to retake the colonies. So what are we doing? We got to fight those guys. So whenever the Second War for Independence, as a lot of people call it, the natives were split between fighting the colonials and fighting with the British. And the ones that fought with the British, because keep in mind, they fought the British for 40 years at the point. The ones that fought on their side in their writings were essentially like, got more money. Like, yeah, they hate us. They've tried to massacre us several times at this point, but hey, they got money. They'll probably win. So yeah, it's that what you were saying, like it's that like the safe haven of rule around you.
The Native Americans really had a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation with that. Like,
yeah, well, I'm not arguing it turned out good for them.
Did not matter who they sided with. It was not going to go good places.
It was horrible. Everything that happened to them afterwards was awful.
Yeah, okay,
all right. Thank you for saving me on that one. I'm specifically referring from the time period of 1812 to 1816.
Yeah.
After that, they were horrifically abused.
Andrew Jackson really went, thanks for helping us, guys. Anyway, Trail of Tears.
Yeah. Very
Jackson,
cool. Face the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not a good time to be really not a good time to be anybody who wasn't white and Anglo-Saxon.
Yes.
Yeah. Bad times.
Yeah.
But
you know, it's something interesting I figured out about we are so derailed.
It's fine. Welcome to the Lore Lodge, everybody. where we stay on track maybe 30% of the time.
You know, the Seminole tribe.
Yeah.
In Florida.
The ones who never stopped fighting.
Yes, okay, that's what I was going to bring up. Yeah, the word Seminole means runaway. I didn't know that. And they were primarily made up of escaped slaves, Cherokees who escaped the Trail of Tears, and a bunch of other tribes that were being destroyed. They all ran to the Everglades because at the time, colonization hadn't made it that far. And whenever it did get there decades later, they never quit fighting, like you said. So the word Seminole means runaways because it was essentially composed of these renegades who were fighting. And I think that is so cool. So anyway.
Yeah, it's an incredible. The Seminoles have an incredible story. I encourage everybody to read up on it. It is one of those stories that will make you just believe in the human spirit in a way that you might not otherwise. Like, what an incredible group of people who really never stopped fighting and paid the price, because we know almost nothing about Seminole culture now.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it was like a compilation of other cultures because that's who the majority of the people who made them up were. They were like other tribes and freed slaves that ascended into them. But reading about their battles, those guys were insane fighters. There's stories of like British, picture this with me. All right. You are a Union soldier. It was mostly Union who like fought and killed them and all that. So you're a Union soldier. You're in boats with people, and because the first thing they did was they got to the swamps, and you're going through that. You're going down a river. You've got your rifle in between your legs. There's like 10 guys to a boat. Then you watch as at the boat in front of you, men all at once shoot up out of the water, hatchet the people on the boat, and then drag them down in seconds. That is a stop. That happened a lot with the initial people who got there. There are stories of entire companies turning around at once because, like, this is not your home. This is not your home turf. These people are ready to fight, and they're going to do it.
People who are supposed to be there to fight.
Exactly. They just show up. Yeah.
They're like, hang on a second. You don't own slaves.
the majority of the Seminole attacks, which is just them defending themselves, happened after the war, because as soon as the Civil War was over, they were like, all right, let's take out the unwanted or whatever. But man, they fought hard. This is so unrelated.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure I would call this unrelated if we're talking about the Jews, who are basically the same story of getting conquered over and over again and not giving up.
They both fought. All right, fair enough. Continue.
It's a tale as old as time. Small tribal group gets attacked by a much larger empire and somehow manages to survive it. That's speaking of small tribal groups that got attacked by empires and somehow managed to survive it. We're now at the point in the story of the Ten Commandments. Everybody knows that what happened was the water, and then Jethro telling telling Moses that he should probably hire some help, and then the War of 1812 happened, and then we had the Ten Commandments. That is the order in which things occurred. Nobody fact check me. But I think one of my favorite things about the Ten Commandments story is, first of all, the fact that Moses has to come down the mountain twice with the commandments because he gets so angry the first time and breaks them. But he literally...
If I was God, I would have had another flood.
Yeah.
Restart.
God's basically like, all right, so the people don't believe you that I'm with you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a very public show of coming down in a pillar of fire onto this mountain with thunder and lightning and great amounts of black smoke. And then they'll believe, right? And Moses is like, you don't know these people like I do. This is basically his reaction.
You don't know these people like...
God's like, I can change him, and Moses is like, I don't know about that one.
Moses got up on Sinai, and he was like, I can't handle it. It's like him going to HR. Like, you have to get rid of these people.
And that's literally what he's doing, though. He's like, I don't know how to get through to them. And God's like, what if I do fireworks? And Moses is like, that's sick, but it probably won't work. But he goes up and he gives Moses makes a whole big thing of it. He's like, all right, everybody has to wash your clothes and be clean. Do not eat anything not kosher. Do not lay with your wives. Do nothing at all for 3 days, and God will come. And against all odds, they somehow pull that off.
Against all odds. They somehow went 3 days without getting down with each other.
Exactly. But that's literally like, they somehow managed to actually follow the rules for once in their lives. And
it's a hard 72 hours, but they did it.
And Moses and Aaron go up Mount Sinai, and God's like, all right, cool, you're here. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to go back down. And they're like, huh? It's like, yeah, I need you to go back down and tell them some things. And he's like, you just...
what the...
And he's like, and make sure they're still sanctified. And Moses is like, but you said they couldn't touch the mountain or we have to kill them. And he's like, just do what I said. Like, they can't come up the mountain, but they can watch. And is this an accurate description of events, would you say?
Yeah, you're pretty on point.
Yeah. So, but in terms of the interactions between Moses, God, and Aaron here, like, can you are you equipped right now to lay this out?
So are you talking before the Ten Commandments, or?
Yeah, I'm talking this period where like when they get up the mountain for the first time.
Yes. Okay. So at this point, Moses has done a big oopsie, as we talked about earlier, whenever it came to the rock. And now Moses is regaining his confidence. A lot of the stuff, this is, again, I'm not condemning Moses. This is just the human condition. But something we see out of a lot of leadership roles, especially throughout the Bible, is that whenever things are going bad, it's God's fault. Whenever things are doing good, it's my fault. Like, I'm able to do this, right? So God's, Moses' failure at the rock was because he did not have faith in God. He did not trust God to continue to do what he said he would do. And he didn't like that God gave him the position among the people. And now that the children of Israel are doing what they're supposed to, he's like, cool, I've got everyone in working order, which is similar to a lot of the language he uses with God directly. God talks about what he can do for the people, and Moses is like, oh, well, as their leader, I'm not sure. And we kind of see, I don't want to say an ego, but kind of this sense of ego that Moses tends to have throughout the story. So at this part, whenever he gets up there and God's like, those people you've done such a great job at keeping in line, go check on them. Let me know what they're doing right now. And it's a lot of what happens, it all comes from the people's insolence, their own free will leading them to false desire and whatever, or evil desire. But it's also to a degree to humble Moses and a lot of the stuff, a lot of the way things play out. Like Moses is like, all right, now I will step up and talk to God as the person to go forward and speak to these people. Which, if you remember at the beginning of all this at the burning bush, Moses did not want this job. He did not want to be the person who stood in front of the people. But now that things are going good, he's like, well, I guess I'll be their ambassador. So God's like, well, you go check on him, and then you can continue from there.
you think you got this? I'm a vibe check you right now. Go back down that mountain.
pretty much. Yeah, basically.
So he goes back down the mountain, and what does he see?
So while this has happened, how long was he up there?
I can't remember off the top of my head. It's not long. It's not long. It's like a couple days.
It was long on the second trip.
Yeah.
The first trip was not. And then this is what, if I remember correctly, this is when he has the commandments, right?
Believe so.
The first set of commandments, because of what happens.
Pull it up in numbers really quick.
So he goes up there, and God's like, all right. Because at this point, the children of Israel are just like humans. Again, it's the human condition, but they don't know front from back in a lot of scenarios. So God's like, all right, here's a list of rules. You've got 10 rules, 10 commandments that are going to be your baseline. And to us, sounds like really simple stuff, but these were some hard concepts at the time. Thou shalt not kill. Shall not commit adultery. Really hard barriers like that. Nah, I'm gesturing a little bit. It was rules for the people to follow. Thou will have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Shalt remember the Sabbath. Honor thy father and thy mother. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house or anything that is thy neighbor's. I think I've skipped over a couple, but yeah. I could probably say them if I thought about it, but I won't take the time to do that. He gives them 10 rules.
I can pull them up here.
Hold on, if we're doing our Bible school thing where we're trying to show off in front of the cute girl that I know the books of the Bible, then hold on, give me a second. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Shall not make unto thee any graven image. Any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, that is in the earth beneath, that is in the waters under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. Thou shalt remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who taketh his name in vain. Thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not false witness against thy neighbor or lie. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house or anything that is thy neighbor's. Oh, which one did I miss?
I might have missed one that you got. That's also possible. Did you hit Sabbath?
Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy, yeah.
I probably just miscounted. That sounds right.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I thought I remembered all those.
Also, I will point out that at least in the NKJV, it's that you shall not murder. I think this is an important one. A lot of people do the "you shall not kill," but I also think that it's important to recognize that there's numerous occasions in the Bible where God directly says, "Kill those people."
Yeah.
It's
There's a difference between
"Thou shalt not commit
just
an
killing
unjustified
unjust
homicide."
yeah.
Would have been the better language for the Lord to use in this case. Had I been God,
I think that's.
had I been God here under the circumstances.
I think that's more an issue with 1611 translators.
Yeah,
than
that too.
Sure, why not? Anyway, I had to flex my.
No,
VBS
you're fine. You're
knowledge. That'll happen as this podcast continues. Anyway, so next I'll name all the books of the Bible. Haha. Anyway,
yeah. So
he gives them the 10 Commandments, and then he's like, "All right, bring these to the people, and these will be the new rules to follow." So put yourself in Moses' shoes. You have just last time you saw these people, they were good for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
They did something they were supposed to. Now just talk to God, and you're like, "God, I really don't think you could prove yourself to these people at this point. What have you done so far that they can't do? But to my people, I'll deliver your message." So God gives him the 10 Commandments, the 10 rules for them to follow. Like, this is your law now. He's like, "Oh, why don't you, this group of people you have so well together, just go check on them for me. Make sure they're sanctified, as you said. Go make sure there's a place." Okay. The moment Moses left, it's Moses and Joshua who traveled up the mountain, correct?
It's Moses and Aaron.
I'm
pretty sure it's Moses and Aaron. Yeah.
I'm almost positive.
It could. You might be. I would believe you over myself on this. Let me check. Moses went up to God. Lord said to Moses, "Go down and warn the people, lest they break through to gaze at the Lord, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them." But Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai. You warned us, saying, 'Set bounds around the mountain and consecrate it.'" Then the Lord said to him, "Away, get down and then come up, you and Aaron with you." So I think it's...
so Aaron...
Yeah, it says you and Aaron with you. I don't see...
Am I misremember? This is when they go down and they're having the party, right?
Joshua is not mentioned in this chapter. Or the next chapter.
I feel like I'm going crazy right now.
Hang on, I'm looking at it.
Gives him the commandments. He goes down. In my memory, Aaron is down there. They get to the bottom.
I think he's alone the first time he goes up.
When do they come down and they're having the big party?
I'm looking
first
for
or second time.
On the mountain with God. Then Moses.
You are messing with fundamental brain knowledge.
Then
at this
Moses.
point.
Okay, so this is I'm in Exodus 24 right now, and 24:9. Then Moses went up, also Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet as if it were a paved work of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its clarity. Then they have a little discussion up there.
Right,
and
so
Joshua is up with him at this point.
Yes, okay.
But
and Aaron's down.
It looks like Aaron's also up there.
I'm gonna scream. I'm probably getting the order wrong. I'm so sorry to everyone if I told so he doesn't have the 10 Commandments yet.
This is after the 10 Commandments.
You are me right now. You're punking me. I'm being punked. I'm now reading it. People are just gonna watch us bicker over verses. Hold on. People
in the third month. Okay, in the third month after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, and on the same day they came to the wilderness of Sinai, for they had departed from Rephidim, and had come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. Wow, that is a lot of repetition. So Israel camped there before the mountain. And Moses went
up. Are you in?
19:3. And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine."
Chapter are you in?
19. Moses came and called for the elders of the people. What? Did this clear it up for you?
Yeah, this is. Everyone ignore everything I just said and place it after the events he's talking about. I was talking about whenever he went up and he got the commandments, when he received them.
That's the next. That's the next chapter.
Yes, I know now.
Yeah.
I got it backward. Okay, continue.
Basically, that whole thing I was saying about sanctifying the mountain. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. Not a hand shall touch him. They're like, even if you touch the person who touched the mountain, you've got the cheese touch now. So you shall die. It says, be stoned or shot with an arrow, whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come near the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not come near your wives. just...
Really?
All right.
Sorry.
Then it came to pass in the third day in the morning that there were thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the trumpet was very loud, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was completely in smoke, because the Lord had descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace. The whole mountain quaked greatly. This sounds like a volcanic eruption. I wonder if God was just like, I'm gonna blow up this mountain. Let's see, and then the blast of the trumpet sounded long, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up, and the Lord said to Moses, go down and warn the people, lest they break through to gaze at the Lord, and many of them perish. Also let the priests come near the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. But Moses said unto the Lord, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai. You warned us, saying, set bounds around the mountain and consecrate it. The Lord said to him, GTFO, but he actually said, away, get them down, and then come up, you and Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and spoke to them. And then we get the 10 Commandments.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was jumping ahead.
Yeah.
I was jumping ahead to the 10 Commandments is what I was doing.
You're fine.
My apologies.
Yeah, so we get
everything I just said apply now.
Yeah, so we get, and then the people are afraid. Now all the people witness the thunderings and the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moses, "You speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die." And Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin." So the people stood afar off, but Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Thus shall you say to the children of Israel, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make anything to be with me, gods of silver or gods of gold. You shall not make for yourselves. An altar of the earth you shall make for me, and you shall sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and oxen. In every place where I record my name, I will come to you, and I will bless you. And if you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stone, for if you use your tool on it, you have profaned it. Nor shall you go up the steps by steps to my altar, that your nakedness may not be exposed on it." And then we get into other laws.
Don't touch the mountain. Yes.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I'm also remembering Moses going up and coming back down, and the golden calf.
That's in Exodus 24, after Exodus 24.
Is it after Exodus 24?
Exodus 24 is when it goes up, and that, okay, clarify, everything that he just said happened before what I was talking about. Exodus 24, oh my word, this is what I get for not having one on hand. Okay. Then went up Moses, blah, 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 all that. And the Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me in the mount, and be there, and I will give thee tables of stone, and a law, and the commandments which I have written, and thou mayest teach them." Moses rose up, and his minister Joshua, Moses went up in the Mount of God. That's what I was talking about.
Okay, I see where our confusion was.
Yes, you are talking about a different time than I was of him going up to Sinai. Yeah, we were both right at different points in time. Yeah.
See, kids, even people who do this for a living get it wrong sometimes.
so anyway, yes, in the times that Adam was talking about before then, every time he goes up there, he talks to God directly. That's when he initially says the people are going to be holy. God says, "Do not touch the mountain. I'm going to be there. Don't look at it. Don't come near it." And it's the priest and Aaron, being the high priest, and Moses who go up to the mountain and do these things. At this point, now later, it says, "All right, come up to the mountain again. Then I'm going to give you a set of laws to give to the people." So Moses goes up, and Joshua accompanies him as they travel up the mountain. Joshua doesn't go all the way up. It says he stops a certain ways back. It says that whenever he goes up, It says, he said unto the elders, these are the people not going, tarry ye here for us until we come again unto you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you, the two priest leaders.
Mhm.
If any man have any matters to do, let him come unto them. Moses went up in the mount, and a cloud covered the mount. The glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. The 7th day he called unto Moses out of the midst of the cloud. The sight of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on top of the mount, devouring in the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moses went into the midst of the cloud and gat him into the mount, and Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights.
It's a lot of 40 days and 40 nights in this book.
There are, in fact. And it says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, speaking to the children that they bring me an offering, and every man, and he gives him the commandments to bring their gold, their silver, their linen, what have you. He lays out here what the tabernacle should be. This is where Moses gets the rules on how to set up the tabernacle, how the office of the priest should work. He gets a lot of information up here. And he's up here for 40 days and 40 nights, right? And during this time, the people on the ground see a giant fire on top of the mountain. So anyway, as Moses is receiving his instructions, that eventually leads to the 10 Commandments. Down on the ground, children of Israel are like, this God guy's a phony. Their leader's like, I'll be back in a little bit, don't worry. They see the thunder and fire. It's like, this is smoke and mirrors. We're getting boozled.
Their exact words are, come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him. This is literally an object permanence issue. I can't see Moses, therefore he's not there. Like,
it's literally like put it together. He said it. He said the one who led us out of Egypt is not here. Just miss each other a little bit. Object permanence. Oh no, the cloud ate him.
Moses is literally like, yeah, so you know that all-powerful, terrifying being that is leading us out of Egypt? He's going to be on the mountain, and he's going to bring some smoke. And they're like, oh my god, a mountain covered in smoke. Moses is dead.
God ate Moses.
God is so powerful, he ate Moses.
No.
Let's make other gods. Like,
yeah, so yeah. While they're on the ground, they go to Aaron. And they're like, hey, we need to worship some other gods now.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever, like, a lot of people will look at the story like Moses and the children of Israel, and they'll be like, wow, God's so cruel. I can't believe he made them walk 40 days and 40 nights. I would have killed them without hesitation. The moment that I, as God, which of course I'm not, God is, infinitely forgiving, obviously.
But I am not.
But I am not. The moment that I had a group of people who I fed every day, I gave water every day, I took care of, and I was sending them to a place of perfection to live on earth. And then the moment I start talking to their leader, they build other gods. This is the rapture before Christ even showed up. Just right now, I'm taking them out.
Isaiah, do you have any pets?
Why do you ask?
I'm just thinking about, like, my dog, Archie, like, I feed him, I give him water, I pet him, I provide him a place to sleep.
And Archie built a false Aiden?
No, but he loves my stepdad, and every time I, like, go to pick him up from, like, staying at his grandparents, he's like,
Your
he seems
stepdad a false deity.
I'm pretty sure if I left for a week, Archie would build an altar to my stepdad.
Okay, all right, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, kill the dog. Anyway. But now that I'm done having fun with it, so the people of Israel, they go to Aaron and they're like, "Make us a false god." Aaron's like, "No," at first, and they keep wearing him down. They keep saying, oh, well, what we want to be like everyone else. And look at this. Moses left you. He's now up there. What are you going to do? So Aaron's eventually like, okay, what do you want me to make it with? So they give him their earrings, their bracelets, like all their personal belongings, and they melt down the gold and build a calf.
Yep.
Golden calf, which is a statue of Baal. The false deity seem Canaanites?
Yes, he would be he's a Phoenician deity, yes.
One of the Phoenician deities.
Which is Phoenicia and Canaan are the same thing.
Their leader is up on a mountain inside of a cloud made of God.
His brother.
They build. His brother builds a cow god.
His brother, who
They
has
start
been there
worshiping
when
it.
God is talking to Moses. Like,
All these people cross the. Again, I neglect God every day. They didn't have the Holy Spirit, but also, oh my word, they crossed the Red Sea. These people. Which is us. I understand. I understand the connection. We lose faith. They lose faith. But still, these people. So
we have a little bit less direct interaction with the divine in our daily lives.
Like, man. Anyway, so these people are they start doing horrific stuff. If I remember right,
I've got it up
it's like
in front of me.
There's like bloodletting. It's like
let's see. So when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord." To be clear, he is still displaying this as though this is the God he's been interacting with, but like a calf for some reason. And he says,
he's literally coping.
And he says, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord." And they rose early the next day, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go get down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded calf, and worshipped it, and sacrificed to it, and said, 'This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt.' And the Lord said to Moses, 'I have seen these people, and indeed it is a stiff-necked people. Now, therefore, let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, and I will make of you a great nation.'" God is literally like, "Yo, Moses, I'm sorry, I gave you a really shitty group of people. Let me get you some new ones, but I'm gonna burn these ones first." And Moses is like, "Please don't do that."
So
could I maybe go talk to them first?
They start having this big festival. They're partying all that. So Moses, who is holding the word of God, the
physical word of
Ten
God in his hands,
is like, people call the Bible the word of God, which it is, but this is the literal words of God that he carved into a rock. He's walking down the mountain. He gets to the base of it. The people are dancing around a statue of an false god, yelling, hee-hawing, throwing sacrifices down, and Aaron, his brother, is praying in front of it.
It's important to note here too that Moses literally debates with God about whether or not he needs to smite these people. Like he literally has an entire moment where he's like, remember what you told Abraham. Remember what you told Abraham. And God's kind of like, your rhetoric is sound.
He's like, I said I'm not gonna kill all of them. Don't worry.
He's like, all right, you know what? Good point.
But at the same time, is it before or after God does it that Moses smashes?
This is before Moses gets down the mountain. Moses is still up on the mountain, being like,
yeah.
Hey, my guy.
While they're up on the mountain, While they're up on the mountain, Moses is already like, before he sees what's going on down there, he's like, they're pretty bad, but don't kill all of them. And God, who knows what's going on, is like, I know. Walk down I know.
It's literally like, I don't know if you have siblings, but like, it's like being the oldest sibling and one of your parents is really mad at your younger sibling, and you're like, no, okay, I get it, I get okay, but like, come on, like, let's just, we're trying to mediate, like, especially when it's you that caused the problem, and now your younger siblings are getting in trouble, like.
I think about God in this scenario, and it speaks to the infinite patience of God, that he's taught, like, because God's omnipotent. He knows what's happening down there. And as he's in front of Moses, and Moses is like, I mean, they're not all bad. God's like, yeah, you're right. Sure. So anyway.
Whatever you say.
After that, they walk down the mountain. And when he gets there, they are doing the thing around the calf, and the moment that Moses sees it, I'm trying to find what Aaron says to him. Up here, and it came to pass as soon as he came nigh into the camp, Moses, that he saw the calf and the dancing. I knew there was dancing mentioned somewhere. They're dancing, sacrificing in front of this calf. And he saw the calf and the dancing. And Moses' anger waxed hot. See, before it was God's anger waxing hot, but now Moses is the mad one.
And to be clear, you were correct. Joshua is on the mountain with him. at this point.
Yeah, so Joshua and Moses come down together.
And Joshua,
they see this.
Joshua looks at Moses and he's like, yo, it sounds like they're at war down there.
Yeah, okay, so let me back up a little bit, because these
verses
are good enough to read. Yeah. I mean, they all are, but obviously. So as they're going down, it says, and when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. Oh no, they're dying. Meanwhile, they're just like hooping and hollering around a calf. And he said, it is not the voice of them that shout for mastery, neither is it the voice of them that cry for being overcome, but the noise of them that sing do I hear. As they get closer, they're like, they're not being attacked, they're singing. So that's not what they were supposed to be doing. And they get there. It came to pass, as soon as he came down to the camp, he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot. And he cast the tables, the word of God, cast the tables out of his hands and break them beneath the mount. So God has given him the 10 commandments to bring to the people. And this is after what Aiden mentioned. Moses is like, they're not all bad. Like, come on, don't wipe out all of them. They're fine. He sees this and he just immediately breaks the tablets on the ground. It says, and he took the calf which they had made. He said, give me that. The calf which they had made, and burnt it in the fire, and ground it to powder, and strawed it upon the water, and made the children of Israel drink it.
You wanna make your own gods? Drink him. Drink your god.
Drink your god. Drink God right now. He was furious. He shatters the word of God. He grinds up their God, makes them drink it. It says, and Moses said unto Aaron, what did this people unto thee? What did they do to you? What did this people unto thee, that thou hast brought so great a sin upon them? Which is a way of saying, you better have a good reason.
I love how Moses' first instinct is like, they better have done something real bad to you.
Yeah.
Like,
and the way he words
this better be revenge, because if it's not...
revenge, the way he words it, he's like, what did they do to you that made you bring the sin onto them? You better be mad about something for this to happen.
And Aaron's got a really, really great response here, doesn't he? Yeah, this was...
I love that we can talk about it like this. The people need to know. Aaron said, let not the anger of my Lord wax hot.
Basically, he's like, hey, calm down.
No, not the anger of the Lord wax hot. Calm down. Thou knowest the people, they are set on mischief. What a dumb way to phrase you building a false god. Oh, they get a little crazy sometimes.
He's like, you know them. They're just guys being dudes. Like, you know.
What, that? Yeah, I barely noticed it. Yeah, whatever that was.
They're just worshiping a calf. Come on, man. We all do it from time to time. Like,
he keeps talking too. For they said unto me, make us gods, which shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we want not that is become of him. I said unto them, whosoever hath any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me, and then I cast it into the fire, and there came out this calf.
I like that phrasing. Like, I didn't make the calf. The calf just came. Like,
I threw gold in the fire, and this horse showed up. Like, what a weird series of events. Oh, it's not a horse. I didn't even notice.
It's a cow.
I didn't look at it. I'm being him.
Yeah,
like, he's like, oh, I didn't even look at it. It's just over there to the side. Whatever.
I don't know. I thought we were making veal. What?
Of letting them have their fun.
Yeah. I like the next verse too. Now, when Moses saw that the people were unrestrained, for Aaron had not restrained them. Like
is that what it's?
Yeah, in my version, in the NKJV, it says, now when Moses saw that the people were unrestrained, parentheses, for Aaron had not restrained them, to their shame among their enemies, end parentheses.
Interesting. Like, that's interesting. That says restrained, because in the KJV it says naked.
Interesting.
And the KJV says when Moses saw that the people were naked. Aaron had made them naked unto their shame among their enemies.
That is also entirely possible. Let's.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Is there a? There's not a note for it in the NKJV, but let me
Anyway, you want me to continue what happens
keep going.
The lesson? Okay, so after that, says that Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, "Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me." All the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. So the house of Levi, it's not. I don't think all of the children of Israel were a part of it, just like the majority of them, because there's mention about the Levites being righteous throughout. So I think the Levites didn't have anything to do with this. They would eventually become the house that the priests were under throughout, like the Old Testament. So the Levi family, or the Levi tribe, essentially comes to Moses, as they didn't have anything to do with it. It says, "And he said unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor." The children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. Moses had said, "Consecrate yourselves today to the Lord, even every man upon his son and upon his brother, that he may bestow upon you a blessing this day." So essentially, kill the rabble rousers, kill the people that started this. That like this is too much. They are too far gone. So pick out the ones that did it, kill them, and we'll ask for forgiveness for this ridiculousness. So yeah.
Wait, I like how Moses is like, "Here's the words of the Lord thy God." My words. It's basically like, I am the prophet of the Lord, and the Lord says this right now. And the Lord, and what happens then? It's now it came past the next day that Moses said to the people, "You have committed a great sin, so now I'll go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." So he's basically like, "Y'all royally screwed up on this one. I'm gonna try to fix it. Good luck." And he goes back up and he says, Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Oh, these people have committed a great sin and have made for themselves a god of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, I pray, blot me out of your book which you have written." And the Lord said to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. Now, therefore, go lead the people to the place of which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sin." So the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron had made. So there's a nice little massacre, and then God's like, anybody who sinned is going to hell, or at least not going to heaven.
Anyone who made a false god and began worshiping it, like, fine, they don't want what I have for them. That's cool.
I'm just trying to make sure that I'm getting all of this correct here. Yeah, and then the next thing that happens is he basically like does the. I'm trying to read with this. Then he commands them to leave Sinai and go into Canaan, which we will probably not. Well, we're not going to hit that tonight, but we will hit the entrance into Canaan and the Joshua period.
And he also makes whenever Moses goes up again, he remakes the Ten Commandments for him. Yeah, so there's 2 sets of 10 Commandments.
Yeah, because the first one kind of
exploded. What all do they eventually put in the Ark of the Covenant? It's the 10 Commandments, Moses' staff. Something I forget. They put a bunch of items in it, but yeah, the full set of the 10 Commandments and Moses' staff are 2 of them. I remember. Yeah. So,
but like before we get to all of this stuff, it also does give us this entire set of like laws as well, which show up again in Deuteronomy.
If you are reading the Bible and trying to understand it from like a logistics standpoint, this stuff's incredibly helpful.
Yeah,
it's like you'll get to like late Old Testament, New Testament, and I know this because as someone who's taught it, like New Testament, you're like, what? Why does it say this is how that's built? Or am I just supposed to know? And then whenever you read the Old Testament, you're like, oh, here's the dimensions laid out. Yeah. That makes more sense. Yeah. A lot of people overlook the fact that it is a book, that it is to be fully understood. It needs to be told in order because information is given to you as you work your way through it. Like any part of history.
That's one of the most frustrating things about people who like try to argue the Bible with me is that I've read the book a few times all the way through, and I still find new stuff each time. And then there are people who be like, well, didn't you know that Deuteronomy 32:8, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, what about...
Here's a verse from a now defunct law that I heard one time on Instagram that therefore should commandeer your entire religious standpoint.
Let me give you my expert scholarly opinion that I lifted from a r/atheism post. The Deuteronomy, the Deuteronomy 30, it's either 32:8 or 38:2. I can't, I might be mixing numbers up. I don't think there's 38 books in Deuteronomy, are there?
I don't think, I could be wrong. There are not. There's 34.
Okay, so I think it's 32:8 or something like that, where basically they say, you know, God's mocking the idea of other gods, and they're like, see, he acknowledges other gods. The Israelites were polytheistic, and you're like, nope. Slow your roll, buddy. There's context. There's always context. But what I wanted to touch on tonight, especially before we got to the end here, was the section in Exodus 21, because this comes up a lot in terms of people trying to claim that the Bible justifies slavery. The term used directly translates to bondsman. This can mean a number of things, one of which is much more akin to indentured servitude. And what you get is, if you buy a Hebrew servant, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go free and pay nothing. That is indentured servitude. Now, later indentured servitude involves the transfer of property or material wealth. In this case, it seems to be basically just nothing more than, you know, buying a contract term for somebody to work for you. But there's a few laws in here, like he will serve 6 years and go free on the 7th. This is, again, a reference back to those 6 days, 7th-day Sabbath. And then you get, if he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master has given him a wife and she has borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her masters. So what is this that we're dealing with here? Is it akin to slavery? Yes. Is it chattel slavery? No. And the nuance is important to recognize. You know, obviously it's not quite as progressive as we'd like it to be with an wholesale condemnation of slavery, but it is saying that permanent enslavement is not an option. You can't do that.
To come to the slight defense of not slavery, obviously, but to the clarification of what it's talking about here, in biblical times, we look over a lot of stuff nowadays because we have, you know, agriculture and housing and other, you know, crazy modern adventures like that. At the time, if you were not a part of an empire or of a city, it was every day was a matter of survival.
Yeah.
You had to gather your food. Agriculture was standard in communities at the time, but for people out, you know, just among themselves, every day you had to find your food. It was hunter-gatherer nonstop. So here, when it talks about a bondsman, it is not talking about you go purchase someone or you go capture someone and take them to your house. It is you, the master, as it's referred to throughout the Old Testament. There's several stories that have a master-bondsman dynamic or master-servant dynamic, is because you have someone who has a household with a farm. Things were not, again, outside of cities. It was much more segregated. It was much smaller groups of people. So if some guy has a farm and a means of like renewing food, then that is how you survive. So the rules God's laying out here isn't for like someone you've captured and then made your servant. It's for, hey, if someone has food and they have property that people can live on and not die of exposure, which they're in the desert, then this is the way that people who stay on that man's property or his housing or whatever are to be. If the servant, as they're referred to, comes in with a wife, then the two of them can live together with the bondsman. He will work for the bondsman because that's the equal share. You know, I have the property, you take care of it. And that's how the bondsman doesn't die. It's much different than like modern conceptions of like, oh, this person is under my rules so that I can do what I want to them and they exist. No, there's no exchange of currency. It's, hey, I've got a farm, you take care of it, you can eat there.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty straightforward.
It's essentially buying a contract for the next however many years of somebody's life.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Is it Is it our ideal freedom situation? No, absolutely not. But it's also not the Bible being like... This was used as a justification by some people for what the Europeans were doing in the 15 and 16 and 1700s.
Oh, yeah. There were kings who looked at this and was like, see, we can sell people. Like, yeah, obviously.
That is not what this verse is about. That is not what that... It was not supposed to be used for this purpose. And if you notice, you're supposed to set them free after 6 years. So it's not like... We're not dealing with just a wholesale endorsement of slavery.
Look, currency was not what it is. Like, obviously gold and stuff like that existed, but it's not anything like it was today. People fought to survive. So it's like, hey, come to my house for 6 years. You help grow and expand this property, and you don't die. You eat food with me, and you can, eat. They talk about eating at the master's table and the different houses around and whatnot. It's just an agreement between two people. It's not. It's a far cry from slavery.
They're not kidnapping other, and notice it says if you buy a Hebrew servant, like they're not kidnapping these people. These people are literally selling their service. Like that's just
they also made gold off of it. It's like, hey, I don't want to starve to death, so you give me some money, I'll take care of your farm.
Yeah, exactly. It's and there's other stuff in here. And if a man sells his daughter to be a female servant, or a maidservant, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. If she does not please her master, who has betrothed her to himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. So basically, if a man sells his daughter to be someone's wife, she will not go out as the men do. And then it says, and then he shall let her be redeemed. You can't have female
yard workers, essentially,
he shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has dealt deceitfully with her. And if he has betrothed her to his son, he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. So this is literally saying, like, it uses the word slave, but what's being said, and only in the NKJV, the KJV uses maidservant.
It says servant in my version.
They're buying a wife. They're paying a father to marry his daughter, which again, not a custom we have now, but
to clarify, at the time, that there's a lot of dispute over that, like in the Old Testament, like, women couldn't live on their own, which for one, there are several women who live on their own. Ruth and Naomi, one of the most famous stories, they like travel about together. The reason it was customary to sell a daughter was because, again, you die if you don't live somewhere. This isn't like a city where you can go get an apartment on your own. You have to have a household that has food and water and a system of living. So if the daughter's old enough, you're not like, all right, well, have fun in the desert. Good luck. Hopefully you run into like a tribesman or something who can take you somewhere. It's like, hey, our daughter and your son get along just fine. How about, she come live with you and she can grow and be a mother and have her household and all that, rather than living with me forever, or I send her into the desert.
Yeah, it's not like a time
human trafficking. Yeah,
this is also a time where you've got to remember that, like, a woman living on her own was not safe. That was not a safe thing to do. Even if you were, like, financially independent and owned a weapon, your chances against a man, not good. Like,
there's even talk about how it was a bad idea to send your sons onto their own. Like even thousands of years later, like when or 1,000 years later, whenever like the Roman Empire was a thing, and there's a lot of parables about like the prodigal son. Even then, it wasn't seen as couth to send a son out on their own, because again, you die if that happens. You can't apply like, oh, well, why didn't they go somewhere with food and water? There's nowhere with food. That doesn't exist yet. Restaurants aren't real. It's all an imagination.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really understand the time period we're talking about here. Is like, this is, the family unit was the core structure of society. There was like, you died in a household with your parents until you were at the point where you were self-sufficient enough to have your own household. Like, this is not today where you can easily just go get an apartment or go off to college or live with friends. Like, you were very dependent on your family unit, and if you were going to go off and not be dependent on your family unit, you were going to have to be dependent on somebody else's family unit. So that's where all this buying comes from.
The concept of travel did not exist yet. The idea of going somewhere then coming back, because that was way too much of a toll. Once they began to develop road systems that you could go out and travel, the way they would do it is people would sell rooms in their house. Like the early concept of hotels and like lodging somewhere was extra rooms that people had, because it was a brand new concept in the world hundreds of years after this, that you could go somewhere then come back. Because to leave everything you have was a detriment. If you were going somewhere, you were staying there, in other words.
And to take things with you, you had to be fairly wealthy. You would have like not only the livestock to carry it, but also the wagon and the money or supplies to feed everybody involved. Like, I think a lot of people look at this and try to apply a modern lens to it and look at it and be like, well, this is ridiculous. No, that's not how this worked at all.
You have to look at it like they are in a PvP server. Someone is going to kill them at all times. They have to be in a household. Yeah, they're totally different.
And as much as I would love to continue the discussion of slavery, we do have to get to super chats. So I'm going to pop us over into there.
So I don't know how we got off on that, but...
It was something I wanted to touch on for the show, because there aren't that many opportunities that you get to discuss biblical slavery, you know? Like,
you said it, brother.
How often do you really get to discuss biblical slavery with the boys? But there's a lot of these tonight. Oh boy. Okay. All right. So if you have questions you want answered, send them in now via super chat. Otherwise, I will not get to them. But to start off, oh boy. The first super chat we have is from Spoon for $10. I got choked by a Spanish man last night. A quote attributed to Aidan Thornberry from June 5th, 2022 in episode 47. I wish I had the timestamp there, because that is phenomenal.
What?
Yekne for 5 said, can't believe they actually got Floyd Collins on the podcast, which is a reference I'm sure I don't understand.
Yeah, hold on, but someone was choked by a Spanish man and just mentioned that?
Apparently in episode 47 of the Lore Lodge, Aidan Thornberry said he was choked by a Spanish man the previous night. I'm trying to remember what the context of that could have possibly been.
Right, so I can't answer the second one. So the Floyd Collins thing, Internet Historian?
Yeah.
I had a video post today, and I did the voice acting for the main guy, Floyd Collins, in it. So I was Floyd Collins, and spoiler, I died. So
you get to do such cool stuff.
So fun. I love it here.
Zachary Shilechi, I'm gonna guess, for 10 said, if you were to hypothetically find a cryptid alive, what type of treats would be most effective for training? Would either of you be interested in investing in my startup Goatman Yoga? That is a hell of a super chat.
Goatman Yoga.
For the Goatman Yoga, yes. Yes. As for if you were to hypothetically find a cryptid alive, what kind of treats? A friend who can't run as fast as you would be my best answer, depending on what it is. Like, a friend with shorter legs and probably a net. And then there's Isaiah for $393 saying, you're welcome, everyone, because he got us to the point where I have to do a sexy calendar. You probably could have waited and spent less money.
It was worth it for the joke at the time.
Oh, you're getting the signed calendar too, so
I'm excited. It was well worth it for that.
Warlock Lightning for 10 says, here's $10 for some whipped cream. Can't have a sexy calendar without that.
Oh no.
Well, now I got to get
the
whipped cream
Bible
involved.
show. This is a Bible show.
I'm sorry. Esau Nothing says for $2, in-depth Bionicle lore video when? Honestly, not a bad idea. I would do a Bionicle lore video. What?
I hate both of you.
Austin McCormick for 20 says, I started watching y'all for just the cool Bible lore and it inspired me to start reading it myself. This Sunday I'll be attending church for the first time in 19 years. Thanks for helping me lead me back to faith, fellas. That's what we love to hear.
Congratulations. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. I'm so happy to hear that, and I hope you find exactly what you're looking for. David Bradford for 420 plays it. Says, I literally watched Wendigoon die in a cave today.
Hence the Floyd Collins reference.
Chappie Grimdark for 2 says...
Thank you for the donation and watching my videos, by the way. I appreciate it. And the videos I'm featured in. Means a lot.
Said, did you know Kentucky has its own goat man? Bro, there's a Maryland goat man, there's a Texas goat man, there's a Kentucky goat man, there's a New Orleans. There's so many goat man stories. It makes you believe there must in fact be a goat man. Or at least somebody with a very strange furry out and about. Nora Vanguard for 2 says, I always love seeing in-depth Bible conversations. We do that. Surfing Cowboy for 5 said, YWN? YWN? I don't know what that's an acronym for. YWN vandalize heathen idols with a good old Tennessee boy while a New England Fed cries in the corner about historical artifacts.
You're a Fed.
I'm not from New England, though.
That's even funnier. He called you a Yankee Fed. That's great.
That hurts me.
I love it. Pronounce the name of this mountain range.
Appalachia.
That's better. All right. Now say it. Say it the way you do, Fed. Say it. Say it, Yankee. Do it.
Appalachia.
Do the thing. Look at it. Look at the Fed. Everyone point a laugh. Ha ha. Ha.
It's how we say it here. I've changed.
Fed. I've changed.
Devin L. Pillar for 5 says, gonna watch later, want to give something. Love this series, really helps my faith. Thank you, Devin. It means a lot. Surfing Cowboy for 2 says, BTW Patreon pay pig now. Is YouTube join more money for you? Patreon is by far more money. YouTube takes 30%. Patreon takes 11%. So, by the way, we have Patreon over at the Lore Lodge. Wendigoon, I think, do you have an active Patreon?
Not.
He does not. But no, Patreon is definitely the best spot for us. And I think the $5 tier has like a sticker or something that you get after 3 months. So thank you for subscribing, by the way. Derek Cueva for $10 says, hey y'all, much love from Irving, Texas. I love all both of you do, and I'm so grateful to be able to live at the same time as 2 goats. 3 if you include Thorn Bussy. Goated for real, for real.
Love it.
You hear that? We're goated. I read that. I know you said from Texas, but I read that entire thing in a Delco accent. For those of you not from Pennsylvania, allow me to translate. Hey y'all, much love from Irving, Texas. I love all that both of y'all do, and I'm so grateful to be able to live at the same time as 2 goats. 3 if you include Thorn Bussy. Goated for real, for real. That is how Delco people talk. I live a few miles from that. I've had to suffer. I've had to suffer through Delco my entire life. I grew up on the border. Hades D Ace for $4.99 says, it was the Beyblade that parted it. I hate that I understand that reference now.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. This one's for you, Isaiah, for $100 from Rock and Ruin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, hey, thank you. Hey, Wendigoon, when are you doing a collab with your dad, AK Jesus? Also, I missed this podcast. We'll listen tomorrow. It's my bedtime, and I want to play video games. LOL, just bought Starship Troopers Terran Command. Question, where is the mana machine? So I guess you have 2 questions, one of which is, when are you and Brendan Herrera doing a thing? And the other one is, what is the mana machine?
I do not know what the mana machine means. I think he means whenever it's fallen from heaven.
Yeah.
Perhaps. So God, that's where it is. As for Brandon Herrera, I've talked to him a few times. He's a really cool dude. We vibe. He also thinks it's funny that the internet's kind of considered me his little brother. He told me that he just assumed I was like the little church brother, that he was like the old alcoholic stepbro. Yeah, he's funny. I vibe with him pretty well. I'm down to make a video whenever he's down. So
does it surprise you that people would look at you and Brendan Herrera and be like, yeah, these 2 are similar?
I get it 100%. Yeah, I'm just saying that he gets it as well. He's also like, because obviously I don't like attend YouTuber meets or like talk to other YouTubers, so I don't know who's aware of my existence, right? So I'm just like, I bet Brandon I don't need this right now, Aiden. I don't need you in your mind games. So whenever I go to talk to him, I'm like, okay, this guy doesn't know who I am. I'm like, hey man, what's up? And he's just like, it's so weird talking to you since I feel like you're my little brother. I'm like, all right, he's seen the memes too. Got it.
Yep. He did one of his like meme review videos on actually one of my friends. Like,
oh, wow.
actually, I was just at her wedding a few weeks ago, last month. About a month ago, I guess now. I was a groomsman, and it was funny because at the reception, we were all laughing about how she got featured in one of his like meme review videos, and he didn't credit her. But no, she and her husband now are two of my close friends from college, so it was funny the way those little intersections happen.
Oh,
yeah, but let's see. Jack Manson for 5 says, me laughing at Judas for betraying Jesus for 30 silver pieces until I realized I betray him every day for free.
Quote gets me every time. It makes me sad. I'm like, yeah. Yes, I guess you're right. At least Judas got something out of it.
Yeah.
Agony, pain.
A horrible death. And if you're Dante, the ninth circle of hell.
In fact.
Garoth for $50 said, my fiance is worried about her faith and I've been trying to comfort her and found this. 1 Corinthians 7:14 says that a holy spouse makes their unbelieving spouse holy. So do I get a +1 for her to heaven when we get married, or am I off the mark? That is a deeply theological question. What do you think? I would argue that if she's professed her faith as an adult, even if she's doubting it now, that's already.
I would need clarification.
It's First Corinthians 7:14. Let me pull that guy up really quick.
No, I mean you can pull that up, but I mean I would need clarification on what he means by doubting faith.
Yeah,
because if you're saying that they are like they've professed salvation before and now they're just like having questions about it, I believe no man's name can be blotted out. So like if that's what it is, then people doubt their salvation all the time. Paul mentioned that sometimes he feels that he is not under grace, just from like personal doubts. That's natural, part of human will. So like you're good on that. If you're talking about like she just doesn't believe in God and is kind of worried about it, I would say that's the Spirit calling her, because the Bible is very clear that, salvation is everyone's decision. It is everyone's personal decision. And in that portion, it's in Corinthians. Did you say Corinthians or Colossians?
It's 1 Corinthians 7:14. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but now they are holy. But if the unbeliever departs, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases. But God has called us to peace. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you will save your wife? And this is in a section about keeping your marriage vows. Now to the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord, a wife is not to depart from her husband, but even if she does depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband, and a husband is not to divorce his wife. But to the rest I, not the Lord, say, if any brother has a wife who does not believe, and she is willing to live with him, let him not divorce her. And a woman who has a husband who does not believe, if he is willing to live with her, let her not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. I would argue that this is about the cleanliness of the spirit, not necessarily salvation itself. Yeah.
So there's a lot of times throughout the Bible, New Testament, I mean, after Christ died, it talks about there's this sanctification is not the same as Old Testament. It's not a physical act. It's people who have like the grace of God. They're within the grace of God. And what he said, because it also says do not be unequally yoked. So like do not seek after a partner who does not believe the same way you do. That's just good advice. But also what it says there, if like the bond of marriage is important, don't break it unless it talks about like, you know, if the other person, I think adultery is mentioned as something.
Basically
adultery and murder
Yeah.
are like the two things it says that like, yeah, that's fine. But marriage is very serious. Don't mess with it. And do not be the one to break the bond. It says if the other bond's been broken, then like, you know, they've committed adultery, then they've broke the bond. You are free to go, essentially. And death, but also, death obviously is also mentioned as one. But anyway, there I would argue it's saying that like just because you are married to someone who does not believe the same way you do, you are still sanctified, and their blessings will come on your household and your children. It's not saying because you've done it, you're cursed now, you're out.
Yeah.
It's saying that your house will still be blessed. Again, salvation's a personal matter. And if it's you or your spouse who she's worried about the faith of, I would say that is God calling one of you to your side. And I'd say continue to seek him in whatever manner, because salvation is a personal thing. And it says no man can know no man can know the status of another soul. So I think if you feel troubled about your soul, look into it. And if it's, you know, faith around her own salvation she's worried about, then God says no name shall be blotted out. So
yeah, I would argue that doubting your faith is a natural part of having it. There's something that
like I said, Paul doubted. So
yeah, there's something that I read once. I mean, Moses doubted, and he was talking to God directly. So we just went through an entire book where the people of Israel are like having miracles occur right before their very eyes, and they're still like,
I don't know. I
haven't seen him yet. Which, of course, then when they do see an angel of the Lord, they're like, "Oh my God, I'm scared." But yeah, I saw something once where somebody, and I don't know, it was probably apocryphal, but somebody was like, you know, they were speaking to a room of, if you were to speak to a room of atheists and ask how many of them had ever doubted their atheism, probably not a single person would raise their hand. But if you go to a room of Christians and ask them how many of them have doubted their faith, then probably every single hand in the room would go up if people were being honest. Like if you had them close their eyes first. I think that a part of faith is doubt and seeking answers and all of that, and it's part of your personal journey. There's nothing wrong with doubting your faith, and
doubt leads to questions, and questions lead to answers. It's
exactly.
Natural. Yeah.
So I would argue that if she's a Christian who is now doubting her faith, that's not something to worry about. And if she's a Christian, especially as an adult, even if she does lose her faith, that's your name is not taken out of the book of life simply because you lose your faith. It's once you're saved. So there's not I mean, I think the Catholics have a thing about blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, but that's I think, yeah, I agree with you, Isaiah. Tyler Mead for 10 says, "Hey guys, just listen to the podcast Lord of Spirits episode about Land of the Giants and wondered if either of you had seen it. Incredibly in-depth and insightful." We didn't talk about the Giants. We'll get to that on the next one. I promise.
We always will.
Yeah. But yeah, I have not heard the podcast. We will open the next one with the Giants. How about that?
All right, that's better. That's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
I promise. But yeah, I have not heard the Lord of Spirits episode about Land of the Giants. Have you?
I've not, no.
I guess that's something I got to do this week. Problematic Farmer, who is one of my mods, for $10 says, "Hope y'all are having a September 29th, 2022. I am. Mattis say Shana Tova, you never did. Shana Tova? I don't speak Hebrew. I don't know what that means. I assume it has to do with Rosh Hashanah or something. Let's see what Shana Tova means.
I'm dumb too. I can barely speak English.
What is the meaning? It means good year. Those observing Rosh Hashanah often greet one another with the Hebrew phrase Shana Tova, meaning good year or for a good year. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, sure. Shana Tova. I was correct about it being related to Rosh Hashanah, at least. Dovin Doragon says, "So what I'm getting is that the Israelites spent 40 years gaslighting Moses and God." What a Chad move.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Also, he says, "Glad to see you survived that cave-in, Wendigoon."
Floyd didn't, but I'm still here. I'm still kicking.
Cakes for 5 says, joining really late, but wanted to stop in and donate before I head back to the beginning. Sending prayers for prosperity, boys. Well, thank you. Prayers for you for prosperity as well.
Hey, Cakes.
All right, and there's a few more in here. What's your guys' favorite Bible verse or quote?
My favorite quote's everyone who's in chat saying, not to defend slavery, but...
You set yourself up for that one.
I know. The moment it left my lips, I was like, there he goes.
Let me find the specific verse so I can read it properly to you. But mine is, if I can pull this up, where is Zechariah? Zechariah 4. There we go. Zechariah 4:10. For who has despised the day of small things? It's really just it's the meaning behind it, which, you know, there's essentially and not even necessarily the in context meaning, but the meaning of those words specifically. It's you know, for who has despised the day of small things? It's basically like, I read it as accept the little things, be happy about the small good things that happen to you, rather than, you know, being concerned that small things are happening and not great things. You know, be appreciative of the little things in life. You know, whether you want to read that as the intended purpose of the verse or not, it's up to you. But that's kind of what I take from it. And it's something that I focus on a lot when I feel like maybe I'm not succeeding to the level that I wish I was, or, you know, I look at where I am and I'm doing better than a lot of people, and I'm doing better than I thought I would be. So I'm not going to be upset about it. And of course, there's others like you know, the typical like Philippians 4:13, stuff like that. But no, I think it's a really, there's so much in the book to take away and to use in your life. Even if you're not Christian or Jewish, like there's just good messages in there that it's good to live by. You know, you can. We look back to Aurelius and Confucius, you know, and all of these great thinkers from all these great civilizations who had these really wise things to say, and we don't look at them and say, well, I'm not a Roman pagan, or I'm not a Confucian, so that doesn't matter to me. No, like, if, you know, there's good messages in there. Let's see, Kalen Kennedy for 5 says there's a song about Floyd Collins by a band called Blackstone Cherry that are pretty close to where he died. Cool tune. We'll take a look at that.
Interesting. I will say I never gave my favorite verse. It is hard for me to talk about it without getting emotional. But
Okay.
As I mentioned several times on the podcast, Paul is my favorite person who ever lived, right? To go from a killer of Christians to being the one who God would build his church upon. And several times, because of his faith, he was thrown in jail. And throughout his writings, he would talk about how he does not hate the life that he's been given because he's been honored to use as a piece of the Lord. And he also spoke a lot of the times in his more personal writings, saying, how could we neglect so great a salvation? Whenever he talks about, like, you know, the pains and turmoils he experiences in life, he's like, I've killed hundreds of people. What right do I have to get mad at God because, you know, what, my eyes are sore or like my legs hurt? Like, it's nothing compared to what I should have. So whenever Paul talks about, he's trying to urge fellow Christians and say, how can we neglect so great a salvation? You know, it means something to him that it doesn't mean to everyone. And I always think about that all the time, every time, you know, the trials show up in life. Whatever I'm withstanding, it's still so great a salvation to have Christ on our side. But my favorite verse in the entire Bible is in 2 Timothy. So whenever Paul was in jail, several of the letters he would write to churches that he would visit. Like, he went to Ephesus, he set up a church there, and the letter he wrote to them is Ephesians, because it went to the Ephesians at Ephesus. He went to Galatia, church there, Galatians, so on and so forth. 1st and 2nd Timothy are letters he wrote to Timothy. Timothy was his apprentice, essentially. He followed him throughout his journey. He learned from Paul, and he was always right there by his side. So the letters that Paul wrote to Timothy while Paul was in jail are some of the most personal, deeply profound readings in the entire Bible. It is the man who began missions in the church speaking to his apprentice to try to give him the strength to carry on after he's dead. He says some stuff to Timothy that is heartwarming. He talks about how Timothy should be careful in the faith, how he should not give himself over to false people, and he talks about the goodness that Timothy has in his life. And whenever he's in jail at the end of 2 Timothy, this wasn't right before he died. Paul was killed sometime by the Romans, but it was one of the points where Paul thought he might die in jail. And while writing to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verses 7 and 8, he's describing to this young boy how it's all been worth it. And man, as he's writing, he explains to Timothy, and he says, I've done more evil than I ever could have imagined. And I've tried to make it right with good, and God's given me the opportunity to make it right. And now I'm sitting in jail because of that righteousness. He says, so what is the point of all of it? When I come to the end of my course, what will I say? And while writing to Timothy, he says, I have fought the good fight, I finished the course, and I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all of them also that love his appearing. And man, Paul saw, he caused more heartache than most people ever will, and he saw more heartache, but he was relieved from it, and he relieved others because of Christ. So to hear him speak to his apprentice and to say that I've fought a good fight, I finished the course, I've kept the faith. He stayed righteous through all of it, and laid up for him as a crown of righteousness, not just for me, but all those that love his appearing. And that is probably the most encouraging words I've ever heard. To hear this man who's been through that speak of the power, the impact of God, and say that crown of righteousness isn't just for him, but for us, for the believers. Man, like I said, I love Paul. It does something to me every time. So,
yeah, and I think I might need to slightly revise my own answer, actually, because of something you pointed out to me in one of these shows, which is that bit in Acts 7 with Stephen, because I do think, specifically 59 and 60, where and they stoned Stephen as he was calling on God, saying, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Then he knelt down and cried out with a loud voice, Lord, do not charge him with this sin. And when he said this, he fell asleep. Like, just the fact that the last moments of a man who is being executed by the very people he is trying to save is him begging God not to punish them. And the fact that it calls back to, of course, Luke 23, with, then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I think those two put together just really encompass what Christianity is.
I gave a Sunday school lesson about that very thing one time, about how Stephen followed after Christ in his final moments, not only from he died for the same reason Christ did. He just told them the truth, and they killed him for it. But that at his death, Christ said, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. And Stephen said, lay not this sin. Man. But so Stephen, who died there, right? He was one of the first martyrs of the church. Peter would later say, the stones that we have built, talking about the church, are on the blood of Stephen. You want to talk about a testimony to have. Stephen, who died, is the blood the church was built on. What a marvelous, history to have.
Peter,
but then he died.
But Stephen is the blood.
Yes. Oh man, stuff like that gets me. The backs that we were built on, the bones that paved the way. But as Stephen was being murdered, a young boy named Saul was watching. He was a part of it, and Saul would go on to do awful things, but eventually became Paul, the one who wrote Timothy. And whenever Paul came to Jerusalem, would preach to the people, about the righteousness of a man named Stephen. And
Yeah.
to think about Paul, who was a young boy, watching someone get murdered. And at the time, Saul didn't know what this guy was made of. He didn't know God. He didn't know Christ. All he saw was a guy get murdered and then ask for Saul's forgiveness at his death. Just heard a man say, lay not the sin on them. Then whenever Saul comes to know Christ, he goes back to Jerusalem, where he was part of the people who killed Stephen. It preaches about the righteousness of a boy named Stephen. Man.
And it's important also to recognize how young these men were. Like, Jesus was not surrounding himself with 50, 60, 70-year-old men. These were men his age, like, and younger. Like, these were people in their 20s and early 30s who were following this man to their deaths simply because they truly believed. And I think that there's, and this little bit with Stephen, I mean, I just want to read from it really quick because we're here. As he's, basically, basically on trial with the Pharisees, he says, you stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears, you always resist the Holy Spirit, as your fathers did, so do you. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who foretold the coming of the just one, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers, who have received the law by the direction of angels and have not kept it. And basically immediately after this, they go nuts because...
I think that's the hardest stretch of words ever.
Oh, yeah.
He's standing on trial in front of the synagogue, the Pharisees. He is in front of the religious leaders, and he said, you killed the prophets, you murdered them. He said, you have been given commandments by the charge of angels and not kept it. No wonder they killed him.
Yeah. Well, and then it says that when they heard these things, they were cut to the heart and they gnashed at him with their teeth. But he, being full of the Holy Spirit, gazed into heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing on the right hand of God and said, look, I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. Imagine being one of the Pharisees in this situation. You are about to kill somebody and he's like, I see God. Like, that's got to be unsettling. That's got to be deeply unsettling as one of the people about to kill him. Like,
And if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't what Stephen did at his moment of death, Paul would not have been the man that he became.
Oh, absolutely.
He wouldn't have said the words that I spoke, where he said, fought a good fight, I finished the course, I've kept the faith. That leads back to what Stephen showed him. And Paul would later talk about how when he dies, he'll be reunited with Stephen. That if that doesn't speak to like the mercy and the forgiveness of God, that the man who murdered Stephen would travel a route to where one day they'll be reunited in joy in heaven.
Yeah.
Paul gets me.
It's heavy stuff, but it's beautiful stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
To get to the last couple of these here, Nathan Winstra for 20 says, do you think we know where Mount Sinai is? What are your thoughts on the landmark Mount Sinai? Do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I've heard there's a mountain in, I think it's Saudi Arabia, but it's like there's a Mount Sinai that people think was renamed Mount Sinai, and the actual Mount Sinai is called like Yagar or something like that. And what's funny is, if I remember correctly, the top of the mountain is scorched black. No one knows why. Yeah, the explanation's that they some people burnt it years back. But yeah, there's a mountain people think Mount Sinai that is scorched black at the top, which would line up with the whole thundering and fire and whatnot. So I think that's kind of cool.
Let me see if I can pull up the one you're talking about. Jabal Maqla is recognizable by its distinct blackened peak. Let's see if I can. Jabal Maqla, and I'm gonna pull it up on a map so I can kind of tell you guys what I think about this. So based on its location, I mean, it would be possible. It's not impossible that it would be there.
That's also why they were just wandering around too.
Yeah, the only reason I say it's iffy is because they come to the borders of Edom. I think so Edom is Edom before Sinai? No. Edom is No, that might work because if they get to Edom before Sinai, and I'm trying to remember the chronology here, if they get to Edom before Sinai, then yes, that would be plausible. If they get to Sinai before Edom, then no, it would not be in that part of Arabia. But no, it would basically have to be somewhere in that vicinity, or closer up towards Israel. I would have to take a look at it. But also the likelihood of a scorched mountaintop remaining scorched this long is something to consider. But yeah, I'll have to take a look at that one. Gold Jackface for 20 says, can I get a happy birthday? Happy birthday, Gold Jackface.
Happy birthday, Gold Jackface. Thank you for being here.
I'm glad you decided to spend your birthday with us. Skeletor for 10 says, hey guys, keep up the great work and thanks for bringing me closer to a faith I haven't really followed since I was a kid. If there was any biblical event you could witness firsthand, what would it be? Hands down, the crucifixion.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah, the crucifixion.
Crucifixion.
Is like, there's other stories that are, powerful and important, but the idea of God dying for me on a cross. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's not even hard to pick that one.
Let's do second because that's too easy.
Yeah,
What would second?
Ooh, second.
You can't do it. Okay, because I would say the resurrection. You can't do
nothing related to Christ's death.
Nothing related to Christ. Christ in general, because like saying you wanted to talk to God at some point, that doesn't count. Point. It has to be outside of Christ.
I'd want to be there for the feast in Daniel.
Ooh, Nebuchadnezzar's feast.
Yeah.
Not Nebuchadnezzar.
Balthazar's feast.
Balthazar's feast. Yeah, that would be good. What a good one.
I want to be a fly on the wall, or like not corporeally there.
I don't want to die when the Persians show up.
But
that would be cool.
I would like to see Daniel drop some of the absolute hardest lines ever.
I love the painting. So much. Trying to think. All of them? Probably Elijah taken up to heaven. Honestly.
Why? So you can laugh at Elisha?
Yeah. If Elijah's not there to do it, someone has to. Elijah's like Paul's my favorite person in like a serious perspective. From a fun perspective, Elijah's my favorite person to ever live. Mm-hmm. Like that guy was hilarious throughout. I talked about, I think last episode, like don't let the rain stop you on your way out. Like that guy was fantastic.
Yeah. That's it.
I like Elijah a lot. And to watch someone get taken up into heaven on a chariot, absolutely.
Yeah. If I had to pick a third, I'd probably want to have a conversation with Enoch. I think that would be interesting.
Before or after he goes up to heaven?
Before. Like, I want to know. I just have questions about the books attributed to him.
Aiden shows up for 2 seconds. Did you write these? Okay, cool. And then leaves.
Literally, be like, I just need to know.
Canonize this for me. I'm begging you.
Can I get that on a microphone? Like, can I record this? And he's like, what? What is this?
Just screaming.
Jack Manson for $20 asks, what are your thoughts on a demon redeeming himself by going to hell and doing a task for each person he personally damned so they may go to heaven? Part of an urban fantasy book I'm writing.
Oh, I thought like, I don't think that's accurate in the beginning, but it's for a book. Yeah, it sounds interesting.
I think that would definitely be an interesting task, an interesting story.
Yeah, it's a cool concept. I just thought at the beginning that you're like, does the Bible say this? But no, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the theology of it would be interesting, but I think you could make it work. Depending on how you're defining demons, would definitely be part of it. If you're defining demons as fallen angels, I think that there's an opportunity to have a conversation with Michael or Gabriel. If you're talking about demons as being a separate caste of spirit, that's inherently evil. I don't think that's possible. And if you're thinking demons as human beings whose souls were twisted, the way that the Supernatural TV series takes it, I think that would be very. I forgot
they say that in the show.
So yeah, I think it's definitely a solid idea. Cameron Hughes says he has a $20 super chat that we missed. Let me go look for it. Cameron Hughes. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Cameron. I see it now. He says, for $20, you guys are gentlemen and scholars. Petition for Wendigoon and the Lore Lodge to make a quality Bible movie. Also, I had an experience being haunted by a dark entity. Would y'all be interested in me emailing my tale? Yeah, email it to me, thelorelodge@gmail.com, and I can just forward it along to Isaiah.
Very cool. And I'm glad that you like our videos. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The ways to do a biblical movie is to not make it well, if you're showing results from the Bible, you can just do it as is. That's powerful enough. But if you're making a modern faith-based movie, the trick is to not make it directly about it, because any movie about any topic that talks about their subject matter or their meaning is bad. You cannot think of a movie about, what's an example, about greed, where the characters are like, wow, money can be bad. Like, and that's the problem with like most faith-based Christian movies. They just talk about faith the whole time when you're supposed to show, don't tell. And so I think it is possible, just not in the traditional Hallmark way people think it should be done.
Yeah, if I were to, and I've been working on this because I'm trying to write a movie that kind of does the same thing with Freemasonry, where, trying to make it like,
don't show the goat sacrifice. Just
of course.
Yeah, right.
But no, so the thing I'm running into is like, how do I write something that shows the positives of this thing without kind of just really drilling it into you? And I think Isaiah is totally right. Like with Christian movies, the mistake that they make is that they try and make this like over the top, on the nose Christian story, rather than just writing a good story and having the main character be Christian and have a moment where maybe they go talk to their pastor trying to like, deal with their faith or something, and have that be
it's
it.
Honestly one of the best depictions of faith I've seen in media. Daredevil, the TV show.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Did you see the Netflix series?
I watched, I think, half of it.
Okay, so like he was raised by a nun, or like he stayed with the nun a lot after his dad was blinded. He went to the church all the time. So as an adult, every time that like a trial or tribulation's broken him down, he returns to the church, he prays, and there's so much good religious material in Daredevil where he talks about like, if I'm to follow God, then why can't I have what I want? What does it mean to be righteous and also to be myself? Like some of the best concepts of faith I've seen explored in media, and come to find out the writers are all Catholic. So that I remember I was watching the show and I'm like, this is like touching as a Christian. Like when at the end of spoilers, at the end of season 1, there's a moment where he comes to church and he's like, I am myself because God made me. Because of that, I have and I'm like, this is good stuff. And I look it up and the writers are religious. So I'm like, okay, yeah. But that's how you do it. You don't, like I said, anytime you see a Christian movie and you're like, okay, is this just a dumb movie? Or am I being like adverse to God? Pretend it's a different subject. Every Christian movie is like, wow, I can't believe that God wants me to do this thing and God does this and God is good. Okay, now make it a romance. Wow, I love my wife. My wife is so loving. I love her. Like, it's still bad.
Yeah.
They just, you have to show, don't tell. There's ways to go about it.
Yeah, I can think of more like good Christian music off the top of my head than Christian movies necessarily, but one that I will point out, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Is a Christian movie.
I hate you.
It's a Christian movie.
You're right, but I hate you.
And think about the messages that are in it. The messages are about humility, honesty, respecting your parents, like your parents respecting you. Like it's a Christian film.
I hate you. You're correct. And it literally the ending is just like the power of God. There's no physical explanation for what happens. Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's a Christian movie, like, but that's how it should be done. And when you listen to music, it's the same thing. Like you listen to bands. What's a good example? Blink-182 is not a band people would think Christian music, But the song Not Now, which, if I remember correctly, Tom DeLonge wrote when he was diagnosed with cancer, the first line of the song is, "Come here, please hold my hand, Lord, now help me. I'm scared, please show me how to fight this. God has a master plan, and I guess I am in his command. In his demand, sorry. Please save me. This time I cannot run, and I'll see you when this is done." Like, and now I have come to realize that you are the one that's left behind. Please stay until I'm gone. Like, there's it's not subtle, you know? Machine Gun Kelly recently had a song where at the very end of it, the background vocals, you can hear, I can't remember the line that comes before it, but "Please help me, Jesus" is in the chorus. Reliant K is just kind of in your face about it, but in a way that when you tell your friends, it clicks. Skillet, great band. A little bit more on the nose, but there's a lot of music that does a really good job of it by not making it like, oh, I'll raise my hands and worship Jesus. Like, no, it's there's
unironically, some of the best spiritual music I've heard has been from Kanye West.
I believe that.
Like, listening to "Come to Life," anything off of Donda, incredible. From obviously not all of them are directly religious, but songs like "Come to Life," "Jesus Lord" are so good. Those are the best way to do it directly, because again, the song isn't just like, oh wow, God is so good. It's him relating experiences of the human life to concepts of faith. He relates it to Kanye himself. I'm not going to get on a rant. At the end of "Come to Life," whenever he's like, he's talking about his daughter bought a gift for Northie. All she want was Nikes, because he's an Adidas guy. He hates Nike. All she want was Nikes, which for Kanye is like a sin, right? The idea of, because he has had entire diss tracks about Nike. So he says, all she want was Nikes. This is not about me. God is still alive, so I'm free. He's relating that I cannot have this pride and ego because everything I have is a gift from Christ. So therefore, I don't need to have this built up aggression because I'm free. I'm bigger than that. I'm bigger than myself. That is the best way to directly attribute Christ's work through music.
I want to bring one up to. I want to screw with some people's heads right now. Think of the band Good Charlotte. If you've ever listened to their music, if you've seen what they look like, they were like the quintessential early 2000s emo kids. The spiked hair, the baggy pants, the black, the tattoos, the chains. They have a song with Avenged Sevenfold, who Avenged Sevenfold is on the nose. That's a biblical reference in the name. As I walk through the valley of the shadow of LA, the footsteps that were next to me have gone their separate ways. I've seen enough now to know that beautiful things don't always stay that way. I've done enough now to know this beautiful place isn't everything they say. I heard that evil comes disguised. Like the city of angels, I'm walking towards the light. Baptized in the river, I've seen a vision of my life and I want to be delivered. In the city was a sinner. I've done a lot of things wrong, but I swear I'm a believer. Like the prodigal son, I was out on my own. Now I'm trying to find my way back home. Baptized in the river, I'm delivered, I'm delivered. That is just Bible reference after Bible reference. And it's a hard rock song. That if you're not listening to the words, you're just kind of vibing along to it. You're like, oh yeah, this is good music. And then you listen to the words and you're like, oh, this is Bible allegory. And it's not subtle. So I have a playlist on Spotify called Unforeseen Christianity. I'll probably link it in the Discord or something. But it's just songs like that where you're not aware that it's a Christian song until you're aware that it's a Christian song. Cameron Hughes for $2 said, "Thank you so much, sirs. Keep the good work." You're welcome. Dovin Drogan says, Doragon says for $5, "Aiden, did you ever receive my email about spirits my local church?" I did. I just have not responded to it yet. That is my day tomorrow, and Friday is going to be responding to so many emails and Patreon messages. Let's see. Surfing Cowboy for 2 says, "Any plans to cover stuff like deja vu, dreams, etc.?" On this show, I wasn't really thinking about it, but I would be down to do that, or to do a lore lodge on it if you want to come on that show, Isaiah.
I'm down.
Yeah. Might not make a full Weird Bible show, but I think that'll be a good lore lodge episode. Let's Let's see. Born Confused for 1,000 yen. I think that's yen, right? Japan's yen.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
It says hello from Japan. I missed like the whole thing because I was working, but I'm going to go back and watch it later. Wish I could stay. Thank you guys for what you do. I love it. 1,000 yen is about $7. Well, I appreciate the 1,000 yen.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's see. We're just. All right. I think that just about covers everything. Isaiah, is there anything you would like to say as we wind the show down?
I think that should be about all of it. Thank you all so much for watching. It means the world. And I appreciate you being here. So thank you very much.
Same sentiment here. This is this show is not just fun for me. It feels good for my soul. Every time we do one of these, I feel lighter inside. So, and it's so great to see everybody in the chat who's in the same place, whether they're Christian, Jewish, agnostic, atheist, pagan, whatever. Sitting in there and all hanging out and learning together and sharing moments of importance with each other. I do read most of the chat as I get through it, and I do see a lot of stories in there and personal messages from people who are sharing important stuff. So I really appreciate it, and I want to thank you guys all so much for watching. We will see you guys again next month. Bye, guys. Go on.
I was just gonna say, even Methodists can watch. It's
listen, you.
All right, bye everyone.
I'll have your beard or something. See you guys.